And then we will, the structure of this meeting, we will go into having this meeting review. And I'm glad to know that Dr. Cash has his cabinet on hold on as well. Okay, so on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, let's say our pledge to the flag. I'm going to stand up because it is the proper thing. All right, 1, 2, 3. I pledge allegiance to the flag,
United States
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, nation,
under God,
justice for all.
indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so the purpose of this special meeting is to review our 2021 school budget. There have been various approaches in the past to do this. I feel that, and in talking with Dr. Cash, what we want to do is we want to stay focused. We want to make sure that our questions are related to the budget and our concerns associated with next year. So in moving forward, what I thought we would do is, I thought it was a good idea to use the proposed reductions in the 2021 budget. To start with, it's on page 7. I thought that from there, additional questions, some of your questions would have been answered. However, if you need more clarity or you want to have that question out in the public or a part of the permanent record, certainly you have the right to do so. And in talking with Dr. Cash from there, what I thought would be a good idea is to talk about, Jeff, our big expenditures that are hitting us the biggest, okay? One of the board members recommended 5, talking about personnel, fringe benefits, debt service, charter schools, transportation, plants, operations. I like to leave, for the most part, the discussion about the school-based budget toward the very end after all of this has been reviewed, because as I'm looking at the reductions, I think a lot of questions will be answered in this view of the proposed reductions. What does the board have to say about this? Do you have any additional ideas or any concerns? Okay, I don't hear any. So Dr. Cash, can we start with the proposed reductions in the 2021 budget?
Yes. Jeff, good afternoon, colleagues. Mr. Pritchard and his team and all of our staff, and working with really all of the cost centers managers have worked hard to prepare this budget for you. And I think that you've read a lot of the materials because they've been circulating now for about 2 weeks. But Jeff, if you could go, especially in the executive summary and then into the budget, where I believe on page 7, Kenny G. You want to finish, Kenny?
Okay. I wonder who did that. Who is that?
All right. And then that sort of gives us the big picture. Jeff, you know we've done this many times. It's sort of that big picture graph that gets us from the 89.6 to balance, right? And we talk about 10 or 11 items that are contributing to that deficit. And then what are the items we're using to balance? Okay. And then the 12.5 million, Jeff, and the 10.2 million, 25 million that I asked staff to come up with from their cost centers to help us with. That might be worth summarizing, and hitting some of the high points there as well. Is that clear, Jeff, what I'm asking?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Can I interject one thing before you start, Jeff? So
Sure.
What I'm going to ask is that after each point you ask the question, are there any questions? At that point, I will be able to see whose hand goes up or whatever and recognize you. Because I am going to be focused a lot on this paper. I'm not going to necessarily be focused on the screen. So if you'll, just like as he go through each point, we'll ask, are there any additional questions here? then we'll take the questions, and then we'll move on. And I think we'll get through this. I think we'll work pretty good if we do it that way. Okay, Jeff, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start at actually on page, if you guys have, I assume you all have the budget in front of you,
Yes.
the budget document, and then also the 20-page document that was a response to your questions. And I do apologize. I know that there were some questions that came in after I had drafted this, and they did not get included in there, but that doesn't mean we can't address them now or later. But in the executive summary, I think probably the best place to start really is looking at where we began in April. So again, that was at that point when the state budget was finished, and you know, we saw in there a reduction in state aid for the first time in about 10 years. A substantial reduction. And obviously we know where that comes from. It's all related to the coronavirus crisis and the impact that it is having on state and local governments. And this is, it's very common across the whole country. So I'm on weekly calls with the Council of Great City Schools, and every district is in a similar type of situation now and in the coming years. But essentially we had an $89.6 million deficit at roughly at the start of April. As soon as we had gotten the state budget information and started to analyze it, very quickly saw that this built up a significant deficit, where typically the deficit would be going down to close to about 10 million or less at that point. So, and on page 6 of the executive summary is really the rundown of how we closed the gap. We made a projection of about a $30 million surplus in 1920. So that surplus will essentially become fund balance at the end of the year and then be utilized in the next year to help offset some of the costs. And you'll see in some of your questions that some of the cost increases that we have in the next year's budget are a result of what's happening in the 1920 budget. So it makes sense to transfer those funds forward. We're also planning to utilize 20 million in existing fund balance. That still leaves a pretty strong fund balance position, all else being equal. Again, we know that there's a possibility of substantial state aid reductions forthcoming, and we don't know when they may be announced or how big or what federal offsets there might be, but we're in a position to utilize some fund balance in next year's budget to help offset further reductions. Next line on there, a recovery of charter school overpayments. So that's that payment issue where we are collecting right now those overpayments back from the charter schools, and we put in an amount of $6 million in revenue for that. We also recalculated charter school tuition amounts based on the pupil count. So the state law, when it was adopted, revised the tuition payment amount, and actually it's a 2.17% decrease per pupil tuition. And that was included, that calculation was actually included as part of our $89.6 million deficit. We would have been closer to a $100 million deficit otherwise. This $2 million was revising the pupil counts downward slightly, just based on the most current projections that we had of the schools, of the various charter schools. Budget department reviews and revisions, 6.9 million. This is really a lot of what the budget department does in terms of correcting, there may be duplicates in the budget requests, errors, sort of common mistakes and things that happen in the budget. So that was those were all reductions that were taken out, and that's just, it's all on paper. There's no reduction really anywhere. 10.2 million is new and unbudgeted requests, and 12.5 are other necessary cuts that at this time they were in planning. And then there's another 2 million of miscellaneous reductions. And this, in the budget, general fund budget like ours of close to $1 billion. That's really rounding. There were miscellaneous things that we find and so forth. So that brought us down to that zero, to that deficit of zero. Again, it's still a true deficit or a budgetary deficit of $50 million because we are planning to use fund balance. But from the perspective of how we're organizing the budget this year, it's balanced. So that's just kind of the rundown on that. Before we get into the next page where we go over the reductions, the 12.5, were there any questions?
Colleagues, if there are any questions up to 6.9, 10.2, and 12.5, that's where we'll spend more time in detail. But up until that point where it says charter tuition calculation at 2.0 million, are there any questions up through those items?
Dr. Cash, I have a
Yes.
question. Are there, my question
in those items?
Yeah, it's with the other miscellaneous reductions. What are those?
That's just, that's just rounding essentially in our budget. So when this table was put together, there's other things that we finish off in terms of balancing out the benefit lines, some of the school-based budget balancing, things like that. So they're really not. It's kind of just paper things to balance it out. So
give an example or two, Jeff, because I know we went through some of those examples, and the bottom line is we don't see those impacting instruction or harming the classroom or any of the services that children need. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. And the simplest example is, so we include about $1 million in health insurance that I hold off as an additional amount in our budget. And that's used to essentially do the final balancing. So when you get down to, because with all the revenues, all the expenditures, it's almost impossible to balance everything out. So I have that rounding amount at the end that when we get down to about $1 million or $2 million, I pull that out and basically balance the budget with that. So it's really just, it's kind of like it's almost like a rounding type of mechanism that we use in the budget.
So it doesn't
impact
$1.6 billion budget. That's not that much money.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't impact any programs. It's more of just on paper as we're trying to build the methodology for how at a high level we want to balance the budget.
Okay. So let's just stop right here. We're on page 6 of the budget for our 2 board members that just came on. Agreed that after each section, Jeff will ask, are there any questions? At that time, you will put your hand up and we will acknowledge you, and we will keep it moving from there so that I will have a chance also to take a look at this data and not have to focus in on the screen as well. Okay, so are there any additional questions with this section? Jeff, we're ready for the next. Thank you.
Okay. So I know we wanted really to get right into page 7. Page 7 of the executive summary of the budget outlines the reductions that we incorporated into the budget. And this is kind of new because in the last several years, we've not been in a position where we've had these significant deficits that we've had to deal with. So I'll start at the top of the page and kind of work my way down. So there were three individual school-based budget programs. So 353 Newcomer Academy, 357 Pathways at East, and 66 North Park Middle. So if you go back to the school-based budget, you'll actually still see those in there. So you can see how they were built, how they were designed. But the proposal that we have is to essentially sunset those programs at the start of this fiscal year coming. And Newcomer has a savings of 1.2 million. Pathways at East also 1.2 million, and North Park 0.6 million. And the total number of FTEs as well, 10 FTEs at Newcomer, 9 at Pathways, 7 at North Park. Now, these are estimates because ultimately any student, if the student is if you pick North Park and they go to another school, that they may fit into an open seat, or these students may require a new classroom being open. So the total number of staff that may be needed is still to be determined, but these are our best estimates based on the staff that are in these programs and what we believe would essentially follow the students. So wherever the students go, that same funding would follow them. So you'll see that even though Newcomer Academy has a school-based budget amount of about 3.1 million, the savings are 1.2 million. And that, that kind of shows you that you're not eliminating all those costs, because most of those costs are supporting directly those students. Same thing at Pathways. These they're both pretty similar in terms of the size of those programs. North Park is a much smaller school. I think there's only about 18 pupils left. The cost of that school-based budget, just because of the size of it, is it's only 1.1 million, with savings of about 0.6 million. So these would be 3 school-based budget school programs that would be sunset at the start of essentially they'd be sunset to start the year. The next one on here is the special education department. So they had developed a plan that they believe can save about 1.1 million or 16 FTEs by reducing number of budgeted self-contained classrooms and CSE chairs. Now, board members had several questions about that, and that was actually the plan that was submitted is actually the final page of that response document that I sent a couple hours ago. So that outlines precisely what they were projecting, though, in detail what that would work out to be. Next one on there was Summer Handicapped. So the Summer Handicapped program that supports many of our special education students over the summer. It's a state program, and it's both grant and federal funded. And this is one of the programs that the state has told us for several years that we run. They call it the Cadillac of programs, that it has supplemental costs that are not mandated. We have in the past several years made some reductions to that program, and there was in this proposed budget a $500,000 reduction. And again, this is what the impact in the general fund would be to bring it down to a mandated level of service. Now, what has happened subsequent to this is that the governor has announced that there will be no in-person summer schools. So that amount of savings is probably pretty legitimate, and I don't know if it could be more, because if many of the costs of the program as it has historically run are obviously their school-based costs. So there could be additional savings there, or there may be some additional costs too, because the program, however it's designed, will have to be done remotely. But that's another area of savings that we incorporated into the budget. And again, it's part of that 12.5 million. There's also a what we'll call a hiring freeze implemented in the central office. So this is not meant to impact school positions. It's meant to impact positions, folks that would work with me, for example, in City Hall, that if we have a vacancy, prior to just posting that position, we'll analyze and determine, should we freeze that? Is that position very necessary and we need to get it posted immediately? Or should we look at perhaps making some wider organizational changes in the department? So these will all be things that will be forthcoming. And based on analysis of the individual departments, finance and HR, and the superintendent. Finance and HR are involved in all postings of positions. So we will be implementing this, what we'll call a freeze, with the intent of saving $1 million, which I assume that that's approximately 15 FTEs. Now, it's not being tagged to any individual department, because we didn't want to put departments on the spot and say you have to cut positions. There may be departments that require additional positions. There may be departments that can make reductions. Not all of that can be figured out in a relatively short period of time. So this essentially is a budgeting tool that we will have this process in place, and it will be necessary for us through our actions to essentially recover that $1 million through this freeze. And hopefully at the end
Okay,
of
Jeff?
it, I'm sorry?
There's a question, so make sure when you finish, let's stop at this and ask if there are any additional questions. Sorry. Mhm.
Okay. Actually, we can, maybe if you want, we're about halfway down the page, so I can stop here if we
Right.
want to.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a question. Assuming at this point layoff notices have been sent out,
No.
they would have to be within 45 days of the school year.
Well, we don't have an approved budget, so until that's done, I'm not
So you're
notifying.
waiting on the budget?
Yep.
You're waiting on the budget. Okay. So what areas are targeted to get layoff notices is what I'm curious to know.
What areas
Mm-hmm.
or what position?
Positions, that's fine, whatever. Positions or your positions would work better.
So, Mrs. Cotman, at this point, it's tough to tell because the process that we follow is that once we can freeze the budget books, the Human Resources Department will actually analyze what positions are needed. So this is part of the overall reconciliation that we do, that that we need to determine how many of each position are there that are in the budget, and then how many folks are filling those positions, and then if by chance there's an overall reduction that's in the budget, then there would be a layoff notice relative to that. It's quite possible that when you look at vacancies, retirements, things like that, that there may still be a need to hire in all the positions. I don't have the information that I could tell you where that would be at this point, but that's part of the process that happens. And then anything in the central office, similarly, when we talked about that hiring freeze, it was really intending to look primarily at positions that become vacant rather than looking at positions that are currently filled. There may be, at any given time, there may be some departments that are looking at their staff and they may decide that it's appropriate to reorganize their department, and that could trigger a layoff. But I don't have that data.
So will the board be informed if that should happen? That
Absolutely.
layoff notices are going out?
For this item, for number 6, yes. I'm assuming does your question just pertain to number 6? Because that's what that's under my purview, and I will let you know. It's about 10 positions, maybe 15, depending on salary. And if we freeze or reduce any of those, then we'll let the board know.
But I'm also concerned about layoff notices across the board, that we would be given a heads up on any of those as well.
We'll get into that a little bit, because there's only so many FTEs that we've cut from the budget. They're FTEs, so we can give you a sense of that as we go through this process.
Okay, thank you. Another hand up. Okay. Whose hand went up? Paulette, I think yours was last. Whose hand went up? Terrence Hurd. And we'll go after that, and then Paulette.
Just one question, Dr. Cash.
Terrence?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, one question is, I know that it's a possibility that layoffs going to happen. You said about 10 to 15 positions or different categories. We have an increasing need for mental health in the city of Buffalo, and how can we protect that, or can we look to hire more in that area, or bring more people in, or maybe work with more agencies to help with mental health?
Terrence, you're not
15,
being here.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Terrence, we're not hearing you clearly at all. So you might want to just use the phone option and call in. She'll say keep your picture up, but then just use the phone and call in, because we had this problem before with you that you're not very clear, and I don't want us to repeat that. I have the phone numbers in that. So I'm going to go over to Ann, and then we're going to come back to Terrence. Once you call in, Terrence, let me know when you're up and in the meeting. I couldn't hear him. He kept going in and out, in and out.
I could hear him.
I could hear him. I could hear Terrence also.
You could? Everybody could hear but me?
Sharon,
Yeah.
yours.
I want to give him a
Again?
quick response while I'm remembering it. Terrence,
Okay,
can
I'm
you hear
sorry,
me?
Terrence. If they can hear you, then it's on me, on my part.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Sharon. It seemed like your voice is going in and out on your line.
Okay, Terrence, listen, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Your question is a good one, but what I was responding to is just the central office reduction of about 10 to 15 FTEs at the central office. I'm not talking about school support folks at this point. So the issue of mental health and SEL, social emotional learning supports, all of those issues, I'm trying to hold in my holdback as part of that, because when we get on the other side of this trauma and this pandemic, we anticipate schools needing supports in those areas. So there's some sensitivity in this budget around that issue, but you won't see necessarily that right now we've added 5 of these or 6 of those and 12 of those. It's just it's a contingency, if you will.
Hey, Dr. Cash, if you can answer this. If you can answer this.
Meanwhile, we have not cut into our social workers or our school psychologists, main support people like that. We have not cut and shown a reduction in those. We've actually shown overall an increase for those 3 categories.
Yes.
Hey, Dr. Cash, if you can answer one more question, it'll answer a lot of my questions in the future. Where are we at with the Ppp Grants? From the
what?
Wait a minute. Okay. All right. We're going to get into that, Terrence. You weren't in at the beginning. What we're doing is we're walking through this first. So if we start taking all these questions, Jeff is never going to get through his projection. Is it possible that you can wait until he gets to that part in here where he starts talking about the grants?
Okay.
Thank you.
But Sharon, he said if we answer this question, he won't have too many more. Now that's one heck of a thing. I'm willing to do it.
Okay, go ahead, make it do what you want to do there.
I'm willing to do that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Can he sign something virtually?
All right. He got shy on me. It's back to you,
Go
Sharon.
ahead and ask the question, Terrence, if that's the case.
I was on the line last week about the PPP grants and that they're supposed to be coming to this area. I'd like to know, have we looked into those that can possibly help us out with our budget, that can resolve not having to cut back a lot of positions?
What is that grant, Terrence? The BPP?
PPP.
Payroll Protection Program.
The what?
Payroll Protection Program.
Through the CARES Act.
We haven't gotten any information about how to apply for the CARES Act fund. We're waiting on specifics from the governor's office about that. We don't know if the funds are in. We don't know the process for applying for them. We suspect there'll be a process, and that process will be key to understanding whether we'll get anywhere close to the amount we expect from just the CARES Act portion of federal stimulus money, which is about 29 million is what we're hoping to receive. But until we see the application process, I'm suspecting we'll get a couple of haircuts before we see any of that money. Meaning not us personally, but the governor will take this or take that. And then I'm very concerned about this education secretary who wants to see much of those funds diverted to non-public schools. And so you then don't know how much amount will actually come back to a large district like Buffalo Public in the state of New York. So I guess the short answer is I don't know how to, there's no more unknowns about that right now, Terrence, but as soon as we hear anything and know anything, we'll inform the board right away.
I'll forward you the information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next person up, I had Dr. Revere, Was there any other hands other than, I have Paulette. Is there any other hand? Jennifer? All right, no problem. Ann, Paulette, and then Jennifer. Thank you. Lower your hand if your question has been asked.
Okay, I have a question about the special education cuts that are planned. So overall, the savings seem to come from changing the level of service for high school NYSAA classes from 611 to 811. And I'm curious about why that was identified as an area that we could expand students, expand the number of students in the classroom, because there's a piece that says except for behavior focus classes. So I assume there's a rationale associated with identifying those. I'd just like to hear about it.
Well, yes, I'll let Ann expand if she'd like, but basically we asked if we could do this. This was encouraged for us to do by state ed.
Okay.
Many schools are doing this around the country, certainly around the state, and it's an efficiency that we believe that we can take at this time and not harm students, not deviate from their IEPs or any of that. So we've been very thoughtful about it, and we think it's a smart reduction to try to take at this time. You can see the other rationale there in 1A, B, C, and D.
Okay.
And that saves about 5 FTEs, approximately $500,000.
If I read it correctly, those are coming from that change in level of service, because we won't need that many classes because we won't go over, right? And I was curious particularly about that level of need with students. Are there any anticipated issues that would come from the increased number of students in the classroom? Because as a part of the cut of those classes, if I read it correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, as a part of the cut in those classes, there's a cut in the teacher aides associated with those classrooms as well. Is there any issues or any?
Dr. Rivera? Hi, it's Ann. Do you want me to respond?
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
Please, that would be helpful.
So the aides or assistants would be cut with the classroom, but there's positions available for aides and assistants across the district. So same with special education teachers. For the most part, we are generally looking for staff. So if the room is cut, yes, the teacher and the assistant would be removed from that particular classroom, but that's not to say that we probably wouldn't need them somewhere else. And moving from a 6 to an 8, moving from a 6 to an 8 is not much of a change. And we think it would, for the most part, some of those students would benefit from more exposure to other students, and they're getting older and moving toward graduation. And a change from a 6 to an 8 is not that dramatic. Also, there are times when they're not all in the classroom together, so it wouldn't be as impactful. I think in general, this move will be relatively neutral for most instances. It's not changing that much. There are districts across the state that use 8s or 12s in these settings as opposed to 6s. So we were at the very low conservative end of that. So a change to an 8 should not have a dramatic impact on
especially at the high school level. Especially at the high school level.
Yeah, we're actually, obviously encouraging students to move toward less restrictive environments in general, because we think it's to their benefit. Transition. Yeah, so we think this will probably be a good move for us.
And then, so there are behavior-focused classes, though, that have a more intensive level of support if we need it.
Yes, if it's a behavior-focused, yes, if it's a behavior-focused 611, we would leave it as is.
Very much. You answered all my questions with that.
No problem.
Okay, next. Paulette?
When they were going over the hiring freezes and the savings of the 15 people from the central office, I just wanted to verify that those 15 people are in addition to the 10 from the Newcomers Academy, the 9 from Pathways, the 7 from North Park, and the 6 from that's just, that's adding up to something like the 57 you are going to reduce in this
Short
plan.
answer is yes, Paulette. These are in addition to those others.
Be hopefully vacant positions rather than bodies.
Hopefully.
I just wanted to,
Under this budget, the survivable version, that can be. We get into these other versions and everything, we're back to a new calculus.
the only other thing I wanted to mention is that in the things that Erie County had done to save money and not have to literally cut somebody's job, on every position that was vacant, the budget director mandated that it had to be vacant for 2 months. You have to eliminate the position, but by putting a 2-month to maybe even 4-month hold, hiring any of those positions, replacing any of those positions, you wind up saving millions just because of the lag.
We understand that.
Okay, so I'm just suggesting that. That might help.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Jennifer, you're next. Jennifer, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I should unmute that. Sorry. So one of my questions was around obviously newcomer. I did do some talking with folks to get some of my answers, but I did not see in Lafayette's budget, and I don't know if it's because you're waiting for this budget to be approved, but I wanted to see what that impact would be on Lafayette once you roll in these students into Lafayette's school, you know? So I'm wondering, did I miss it? Was it in there? Do we have those projected, like what Lafayette is gonna look like? I do know that this is something that isn't just sudden. I do know this is, you know, a conversation that's been had for quite some time now, and it's not just a surprise, which if I didn't make some phone calls, I wouldn't have known. So I appreciate the folks I talked to, but I would have liked to see in the budget how that would impact Lafayette before I was to approve, you know, approve kind of that move and not have this question basically. And then my other question is, when you talk about, you know, Central, East, this freeze, one thing I did want to say was I hear Paulette, because I'm looking for like a timeline of how long the freeze might be, or what's your estimated timeline of how long you're going to put this in place. And then also knowing that I've been putting questions forward around athletics, and that's a true concentration of mine. Is that department included in this central office? Because there's so many positions that I know need to be filled in order to support the position that's been filled recently. So I'm wondering if that's part of, you know, when you say cuts or freezes, in order for us to be successful, once we get back to brick and mortar or whatever we're doing when it comes to athletics, we need some serious positions filled in that department. So I don't know if that falls into your central office. So it's those two questions I have right now.
Well,
Okay,
let me answer those as clear as I can. Thank you for those questions, Jennifer. The issue with Lafayette and folding newcomer into Lafayette, I'm not sure we put the accompanying positions into the Lafayette piece at this time. Is that true, but Jeff?
They're not in the Lafayette budget at this time.
But they would be able to be folded in, and we've accounted for that in the overall picture.
That's correct. Yeah. So we made the assumption of much of the staff continuing. We just have not created essentially the school-based budget book for what it would look like. It may not be that hard to do. It would take a little bit of time to pull it together, but we could probably put together an initial draft of what that combined school would look like.
Well, I wouldn't want to rush it because, again, colleagues, we built the flexibility in. When I say rush it, I wouldn't want to do it like by tomorrow, because I want to talk to the principals. I want to talk to the ASLs and get involved. and the staff so that they, so we can make the best fold possible in that situation. And all of the students may not choose to go into Lafayette. We may, because there is some of that consideration for some of the families and for some of the students. That was a very specific program for newcomer speaking English for the first time. But we're prepared to support all of the students over into Lafayette, and there's space there, and there are supports enough to get that piece done. On the athletics piece, Cecily and Mike, those are not positions that I had in the freeze or in the reduction part at this point. Beneath that, I'm not sure how many positions you're alluding to, Jennifer, but I'm trying in this budget. I don't know about other scenarios, but in this budget, we're actually been trying to strengthen and reorganize athletics so that it's better than ever. And we're off to a good start with these two hires, but then they're going to continue to meet with me as they have to suggest reorganization recommendations and what they would need to go to first in class in our athletics department. So no, in my mind at this time, I don't have reductions in that particular area, but there are not that many people in that department anyway.
Thank you. Is that your question? Terrence Hurd, you have an additional question?
Yes. We talking about that department also is central registration. They're going to be coming up hopefully for the next committee meeting, but just strengthen that department also. I know that with cutbacks and things like that might be difficult at this time, but just to get some of the things that were resolved and community concerns.
Okay, well, we're a little bit off topic, but I duly noted.
Are all questions answered? I will remind you that you should take your cameras off if you are doing anything that is not proper at the board table. Paulette, I would like for you to turn your camera off. Thank you.
Can't hear you, Sharon.
Move. Me?
I hear you.
Oh, you cut out for me.
Thank you.
All right.
Is my camera
Okay.
off? I thought it's off.
No, it is
Yep.
not.
We can all see you.
Always put a piece of tape over the camera. Okay. All right.
We're on number 7. Number 7. You
Let's
want Jeff
move
to
forward.
pick up?
Thank you.
Jeff, pick up with
Please go
number 7,
forward.
okay?
Okay. All right, ELT transportation savings, $2.5 million. This is the largest portion of the, at least in the general fund, the largest portion of that program is transportation. And we're anticipating to make some changes to the program, perhaps not to be completely virtual, but that would allow us to reduce the cost of transportation in 2021 budget. So that was the next one. Community school program reductions, $1.4 million. So there's a handful of things in here. We had previously provided an allocation of funding through community schools to Westminster Charter, which we're proposing to remove out of this budget. We're also proposing to reduce the contract with Say Yes. Again, in recognition that there's going to need to be reductions in probably a lot of the things and changes in a lot of the things that community schools does. In terms of how it does it, maybe more virtual and so forth. There is also in the past we've kept an amount in essentially the central community schools that we could use for expanding community schools, because sometimes when the budget was being developed, we may not have known which schools would be community schools. There was a growth period for a time. So that amount that we kind of held back in reserve for additional programming, we've reduced out of the budget. And then there was also, last year, there was a professional development program, a one-time program. I don't have the details on it. I'm just looking at the budget summary, but that was reduced as well. So through community schools, roughly about 1.4 million. And the allocation of community schools funding, so community schools funding is a set aside within foundation aid, did not change this year. So this is the first year since it's been implemented that there was no growth. It's the same, and we've built up, based on the schools that we have essentially more costs that are eligible for the program than the community schools set aside. So for to the extent that there are any reductions that happen, we backfill them with costs from those schools that are eligible for community schools programming. So, and then I don't know, depending on when the state starts increasing state aid again, which could be a couple of years down the road, that's probably the next time that we would see community school funding grow beyond that. Next item on this list was—
Jeff, we have some questions. Someone's hand is up.
Okay.
Someone raise their hand. Hey, please take your hand down. If you—
It's your hand.
I'll check that mic.
It's your hand, Sharon.
Your hand.
Oh, I have a question. I thought it was someone else. I have a question for the ELT. Okay. Are you saying that you're expecting children to go home and study or to participate in ELT on the computers after they've been in school all day, or possibly after they've been on computers all day, depending on what happens with the turnaround or returning back to school? Is that what you're saying that the ELT program is going to look like? Because it says will be revised to become virtual. What about that?
Yes. We're going to have to begin to dismantle the ELT program as we currently know it. And this is one of the areas that is my recommendation to begin. It's a tough one. Don't want to do it, but it's an area that we can save. And as we get better at our remote learning and our other forms of reach out, we believe we can create a great program for the children. We're already practicing that as we speak with Say Yes and with our community-based organizations.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Yes, Jeff, number 9.
Okay, so closed building numbers 86 and 187. We expect that would save about $400,000. 187, the board actually approved closing it a couple years ago, but there were still, and that was due to the high cost of renovating that building. It's still being used for textbook inventory, which we're looking at reorganizing some of the things down at the service center and 64 Bailey to allow that textbook inventory to move down there. So that would clear out the remaining programs that are in 187. And then School 86, the CCI program proposal will be to move that to the now vacated Tri-Main lease now that the OTC program is moving. So those, and this is probably a pretty conservative number, but it's tough to get a good grip on it because there's both engineering costs, maintenance and repair, and utilities, and sometimes it's tough to estimate those. But that 0.4 or roughly about 400,000 is what we expected out of that. Next page, transportation reductions of a 0.4 million. This is really bringing back into alignment the bus aid expenditures. And again, this is based on the assumption that we are transporting students as we have in the past prior to closure, starting in September. So there was a proposal to increase the overall allocation of bus aid expenditures from the prior year budget. The last several years, we've not been able to fill all of those positions. So we reduced 0.4 million out of that request. It's still an increase. Historically, and the superintendent said this several times, that to the extent we are able to fill these positions and they're needed, we can move money in to do so. But in this case, the proposed increase that was in the budget was reduced down to a smaller increase, if you will. Last item on this list is our other reductions, and this is both departments looking at their own budgets, and the budget department looking at things like overtime, utilities, travel, meeting expenses, some other final benefit adjustments as we adjust the FTEs that we talked about earlier. So other reductions were made. None of these things, they don't touch staff. They're essentially discretionary type items that are in the budget, and through kind of scrubbing that department that we did, we're able to reduce out of the budget that 2.1 million. So this list that we've gone over it adds up to that 12.5 million. Of reductions, and again, it's 57 FTEs is what we estimate that to be. Ultimate, the final number may be a little bit different, but that's our estimate at this time.
No questions? Okay, Jeff, could you go back over those 57 are not in the classroom? That's not reflective of the classroom, right?
Well, no. So some of them, the Newcomer Academy, Pathways at East, North Park, those do include not necessarily just classroom, but those would include school-based staff.
Okay, but
as would special ed. The primary ones that are in the central office, is that freeze that we would be implementing.
All right, just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you. All right, Jeff, we're moving on. We're moving forward.
All right, colleagues, going into the $10.2 million section of cuts, or ways in which we balance the budget. They're not necessarily cuts. Much of this is just were not included in the budget. So they were like new requests that then we did not include in the budget, given the exigency that we're in. So Jeff, if you want to go through that particular section.
Sure. The 10.2 million. Now this was made up of several items, and one of them being new requests. So when we do, like when the budget process starts, and the departments, the school-based management teams budget, the school-based budgets, there's certain constraints that are put in, and essentially the last several years we've really told departments that you have to hold steady, meaning if you can reduce, that's great. Otherwise, please don't put in large increases, and if you do, we're going to pull them out and we're going to look at them and determine if they're things that can be included in the budget right away, or maybe they're things that have to be sort of tabled, and we would address them during the year or with further analysis. So there's new requests that came from departments, so there was about 3 million in new requests that came from departments that were not included in the budget. Primarily, these were from the IT department for new equipment. Now, there's a few mitigating things that we have here. Primarily, the Smart Schools funding is where additionally, there may be, I don't know if this is another possibility, but some of the FEMA related things, if there's anything that can cover that as well. So there some costs from IT. Some of these needs, and so that's that piece. Schools every year, so the school-based budgets every year, there are additional staffing requests that the schools make on top of what the school-based budget allocations can absorb. And those requests are encompassed also as part of that 10.2 million.
Jeff, problem with Jeff. Does anybody? Telling me there's a problem.
He's frozen. Jeff.
Jeff, you might need to call in.
Darren? Darren?
I'm here.
Call Jeff.
Yep, I'm walking over to his office right now.
Okay, so Dr. Cash, he's approaching the school-based budget piece, which one of our conversations where we was going to wait until.
Well, this is a little different than the school-based budget, but there is some overlap in the new requests. But the questions that you had and some of the questions he did lay out in the response document that we sent earlier this afternoon. And there's like, Jeff, are you there?
Yep, I just got back and apparently I reached my time limit, I guess. So I don't know, Jared.
Jeff. That's a good one. Do I have a time limit?
No, Dr. Cash, we put 2 quarters in for you. Okay, you're good.
Good. All right. Go ahead, Jeff, because they missed some of that. So say some more, say the departmental budget piece again.
Okay, so yeah, the departments, in large part, the departmental requests, new spending requests are from the IT department. And this is something that we're still analyzing and are likely going to need to be funded through Smart Schools or some other funding source, or they can be at least. I know that's one area that some lobbying at the state has been done, trying to get the state to move quicker on some of the Smart Schools approvals, so that way school districts can quickly deploy technology. I mean, that was the whole genesis for Smart Schools, was to deploy technology to schools, and this is a great need for it, obviously. So that was that. The next part is about $3.9 million of school requests. So these are funds that are above and beyond what the school-based budget amounts can support. And we gather these requests after they are approved by the Associates of School Leadership. And then typically there's a process over the summer, and as more information is gained, that the superintendent would determine which of these can be supported and brought into the school-based budgets, or which need to be held, or which we just don't have the funding for. And then the other piece was, within the Title I fund, we had included Title I and Title II. We'd included roughly $5 million, or actually less than that, 4.9 something, of reduced class size teachers that were grant funded. The Title I grant and Title II, with all the other programs in there, are not going to be able to fund those. And within, essentially, we have absorbed these within the school-based budget. So the reduced class size teachers, those are all at our K through 3rd grade. Those are actually included. So those were initially items that I had thought when we started looking at the budget, that we're not going to be able to fund them in the grants. There won't be funding in the general fund, but we were able to include those and maintain those in the school-based budgets. And so that 10.2 really is about half that, because a good portion of that actually is included in the budget and in the school-based budgets.
Okay, Jeff, there's a question. Whose hand went up? I'm sorry. Mr. Hurd?
Yes, my question was to Dr. Cash about this. You said you were going to meet with the principals to see what's needed for each school. Is it possible that you can supply the board with like bullet points for each school to find out the needs of that school and what can be supplied and what can't be supplied due to the budget crunch?
Well, we have a process now where the ASLs meet very in-depth meetings that go on for weeks with their school principals. And then that comes up to me, and I meet with the ASLs on a weekly basis. And then twice if we count cabinet. So because we're in such a fluid environment with this pandemic, none of us really know what we're gonna need on the other side of this. Even the school principals don't fully know at this time what they're gonna need come the fall. So we're on standby. That's why we have this planning, this deep planning that we're doing for reopening, deep planning for summer school, where we're gonna continue to try to refine our virtual learning environment. And then we've got to get really outside the box going forward. I mean, I don't see how we can continue. If we get into a devastating or unrecoverable scenario, those are just terms that I've used, I don't see how you just continue to do business as usual. We're going to have to really, really think about new ways of innovating our delivery system, you know? So that's where I'm thinking about, and that's why these committees, I wanted us in these ad hoc committees to brainstorm and get together, research, and talk about what we're doing well, but what could we do even better if we did it differently. And that's kind of where we're going to have to be going. So we're here to support these schools and what they need. That's priority one. I'm just saying that's why I have this holdback. It's a $5.3 million holdback. That's a considerable holdback, but it's flexible so that it can help school to school. Let me give you another factoid. There's 60 schools, right? Out of the 60 schools, only 19 had requests for something new in the new year. 40, none. And of those 19, they averaged about 1.7 FTEs, but only a handful of schools, about 6 schools, had more than 2 FTE requests. So really, when this shakes out, you know, as I do almost every year, they're the same schools that I have to end up revisiting, rightfully so, because they're schools that struggle. They're schools where we're trying to improve their accountability status. We're trying to improve their graduation rate. We're trying to improve sort of a balanced curriculum for them. And you know, during the years that I've been here, we have addressed those needs. Usually come down to East High School. It come down to Burgard has needs. MST, IPrep in the past, but not as many FTEs. And those are schools that we take a fresh look at every year. And that's built into this budget as well.
Dr. Cash, one thing I know from this virtual learning and speaking with parents is that one thing we need to keep is reading teachers. And that's one thing that we can look into the budget, because reading teachers can be done virtually also. And we have a huge illiteracy rate, you know, the city of Buffalo among parents also, and can't comprehend the words or understand the meanings. And we can try to find in the budget, because we can use the literacy teachers both ways, if it's in class or if it's virtual. They both have a good base, you know, where we can help our kids.
You can. If it's a great reading teacher, if it's a great teacher, I'm looking to get the great teachers, the ones to distribute and teach the lesson, and then other teachers and staff to provide the supports in the smaller group setting. Let's talk about that reading teacher issue. I know that's a question that comes up. I've looked at it. It's about 6 teachers fewer than last year, but there's a good reason for that. So let's answer that question right now, if we could. And you sent me the data just before the meeting. Would you like to review the highlights of that for the board, please?
One moment. Mr. Scott, would you like to hold your question until after this presentation is done about the reading teachers, or do you want it to be included? You want to put it out there so it can get answered?
My question has to do with the reading teacher, so I'll hold to wait for Dr.
All right.
to answer.
Well, go
Okay,
ahead and
thank
ask the
you.
question too, Larry, so we can make sure we embed our response to it.
Well, you know, my understanding is that in the district budget, every school is guaranteed a literacy coach. And each building in their school-based budget needs to buy a reading teacher. And as you mentioned, Dr. Cash, we're looking at a reduction of 6 reading teachers. We know that reading is a huge need across Buffalo, and it's a need that's only growing as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic. I'm concerned that we're going to be reducing reading teachers when our students are really going to need that direct service more than ever when they return to their buildings. And I understand that our budget is in a tough place right now, and I'm wondering if there is any way for us to reallocate some of the literacy coaches that we have towards reading teachers to provide that direct support that our students are going to need.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Cash, I'm back in.
Yeah,
I got kicked out of the meeting.
I just was getting a funny text from Ann. Ann, are you back on?
I'm back in. I hung up instead of hitting unmute.
No, you just hung up. Okay, Ann, did you get those 2 questions? Those are good questions.
I caught the tail end of Mr. Scott's question. I didn't hear the first question.
Okay, well, you'll answer Mr. Hurd's question with what you have here, and I'll also add some points to Terrence's question. Just share what the data is showing, how I don't think this is going to be an impact in the way that we might imagine it to be if we're just cutting reading teachers, because good reading teachers are very important in our school system and to our population of children. But go ahead and say what your data is showing you.
Sure. So it definitely varied by school, and school teams made choices that they felt would support the students at their building. So for example, one of the schools has a very large number of ENL teachers and still has a reading teacher, and felt that the decision they made, they would still be able to support their students in terms of literacy. Other schools already had 2 teachers. They're trimming maybe to 1.5 or 1, but they felt that their data supported that they might need to use that money differently. So in some cases, they might have chosen a social worker instead, or some schools wanted to look at increasing their 7th and 8th grade staff to full-time so that they could improve RTI services to those students. So it definitely varied across buildings, but there was no building that, to my understanding, that felt that they were going to be harmed in any way. They just made some different choices. And total, between retirements and other things, it'll probably end up being somewhere between 5 and 6 positions.
5 and 6 reading positions, right?
Correct.
I count 8 in my schools alone.
There are other mitigating circumstances because some schools added staff, and there was a retirement as well. So it'll end up being closer to 5 or 6.
So for clarification, philosophically, I feel like we should, and this is maybe more of a long-term conversation that we need to have, we should be guaranteeing reading teachers for every building rather than guaranteeing literacy coaches. That's the way I feel. And I'm just wondering, I think we need more reading teachers than what we currently have right now. And I'm just wondering if there is the option of allocating some of our literacy coaches towards reading teachers to eliminate this cut to reading teachers at a time that we're going to need them most.
That is a larger discussion. I don't know if we can answer that today, because we shifted from instructional coaches when I first came, which were prevalent everywhere, didn't quite know exactly what they did, to literacy coaches because of the data on literacy. We needed to focus on growing the literacy skills of our students. And we've been doing that now for four or 5 years, and made some improvements, but not where we need to be in terms of literacy. That's a it's a complex skill, and it needs to be practiced and worked on all the time. No breaks, no one step forward, 2 steps back. And we're working to address the gaps on that. But we haven't shifted to that philosophically at this time.
Dr. Cash, I would also add that we've invested in training all of our teachers at the primary grades to be teachers of reading, in the sense that we recognize how important it is for the first teacher prior to intervention to have solid instruction. So we have used the Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling as an in-depth training for our teachers across the board at the primary.
Letters, right.
So that the first instruction is stronger than it has been.
That's a good point, Ann. My apologies. It's not the same, Larry, but you understand that is a foci too, is to make sure that first instruction, I've always believed in, and if you can do it, Larry, every teacher needs to be a reading teacher, every teacher, high school
Absolutely.
teachers including, but they have to get trained and get better to be able to do that. So we have invested millions in the letters training, which is designed to help them get better at some of the basics of good reading skills for populations like ours. But we don't have in our budget nor in our plans right away, and we need to talk about it at some point, to have a reading teacher or multiple reading teachers for every school.
And I completely agree with that and support it. But I also think we'll always have, especially in Buffalo, a significant percentage of students that are going to need supplemental support that can be provided by a reading teacher. My older son was one of them, and I saw how it benefited him.
Yeah,
and I'm just putting it out there on the table right now that it's one of my asks that we reallocate some literacy coaches towards reading teachers for this current budget.
Yes, but it also been found that child respond better to a secondary literacy coach or even a reading teacher than they do to have a primary as a teacher, because it's a one-on-one thing that they use to learn. So that's why I recommend a separate, not using the teacher as a coach, but just having a separate person they can go to and have a one-on-one basis.
Well, colleagues, there's a lot of research on reading. I don't want to get into arguing that point. It's more research on reading than any other single subject.
Okay.
And so we should have that discussion, but I would recommend we save it for a committee.
Paulette has her hand up, and please lower your hand if your question has been addressed.
Dr. Cash, you're saying you believe you cut reading teachers by 6. I'm looking just at my schools. Herman Belladillo lost a reading teacher. I looked on the state website. More than majority of their students are 1s and 2s. How can you say we don't need intensive instruction? He lost 1.3. Best, another school that has reading challenges, lost reading teachers. School 17, 1 reading teacher. Harriet Tubman lost a reading teacher. Another reading teacher. Montessori, 1.5. And another one. So I'm looking at 9 in just my schools, and I don't understand how I go to the state website and they say these children are 1s and 2s, and then I look in here and you're cutting reading teachers. I don't. And it's a lot more than the 6 that you're indicating.
I'm not sure
everybody else lost them. I do believe other schools lost them because I looked at some of the other schools, but you got 9 on just mine.
I don't
know.
I'm not sure that, could I see the chart you're looking at? Because I'm not showing cuts at the buildings you're mentioning.
I'm looking.
It's the budget.
It's the school-based. It is the school-based budget. Just pull Bennett Montessori and you'll see, it used to be 3, it went down to 1.6.
And
Then they bought 0.4 from a grant, so they're down from 3 to 2. You can look at Mikowski reading department, 2.4 cut down to 1.7. Robert Daniels, and some of my schools are challenged too, guys. They need some help. Let's see, Marva Daniels.
No kidding.
So I might be looking at something different. I'm saying that they increased.
No, I don't know what you're looking at, but the budget we were given and printed out, I'm reading you the budget, and that's why I'm saying no. These are the reductions at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So I'm not aware of any reading teacher decimation across the district. My staff would let me know about that.
Can I answer that question?
Please,
Yes,
do.
Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, Paulette, what you're looking at, so if you take a look, reading and math, so any of the coaches, so we were talking about the reading teachers, and then the, where's my document, the coaches. Any of the coaches were reclassified down to the coach line. And maybe for all the board members, if you go to page 134 of 134 in the budget, where you'll see coaches, like there's a FTE by department. And then if you look at coaches, you'll see that the coaches, it looks like they grew by about 45 positions. And then when you look at reading, it looks like it dropped by about a similar amount. So all those, the literacy coaches were previously incorporated into that reading line. And again, this is one of those things that we had to change because of the state transparency reporting. They're reclassified because they are more appropriately defined as coaches. So they've been moved. So the data of the data that you actually see in the school-based budget, you've got to, if you combine the reading, look at both the reading and the coaches, because that initially kind of threw me for a loop as well, because it looked like several schools, almost every school was dropping a reading teacher and adding a coach. That was not the case. That's just how they're reported in the actual documentation.
So in terms of true reduction, Jeff, we're still talking about only 6 reading teachers system-wide.
Exactly. That table that is in page 11 of 20, that table outlines that.
Thank you.
Okay.
So then, Dr. Cash, your issue would be to follow up and find out what's more effective, a coach who doesn't work with the children hands-on, or an actual reading teacher that does hands-on, because it seems like you're saying you flipped. You're diminishing reading teachers and replacing them with coaches.
No, that's not what we said. Ann, you want to respond?
Yes, so we maintained the same number of literacy coaches that we had last year. Nothing changed there, except perhaps a 0.5, I think, at one site. The potential decrease would be between 5 and 6 reading positions, but that's it. We didn't increase the same amount in coaches, so it wasn't a 1-for-1. The coaches are relatively flat, with the potential of maybe a 0.5. I think I saw in Jeff's chart. And then the reading teachers potentially down by 5 or 6 positions, but that's not a permanent situation either. Those things tend to fluctuate, but that is the proposal right now in the school, based on the school-based request.
Okay, I have a question from Kathy Evans Brown.
Hi, thank you. Can someone define what's the difference between a reading coach, a literacy coach, and a reading teacher? Because as far as I'm concerned, if you have a good reading teacher, you don't need a literacy coach. Thank you.
Sure. So Yes, so a reading teacher tends to work with very small groups of students, between, maybe 5 to 8 students at a time. It is determined by data and by the school which students she'll be supporting. So she is working directly with students for the most part. Literacy coaches are sort of like embedded coaching, so they can go in and provide professional development. They tend to run most of the grade level meetings, principal. They support teachers in their growth as teachers. They really are often a strong support and very valued at the school level, just as reading teachers may be. So they're different roles, but I would say that it's not that one is more important than the other. They just serve a different purpose.
How does the literacy teacher help build reading skills, literacy skills in students, Ann?
So the literacy coach is able to support the development of all teachers at the building in terms of literacy. She can support the social studies teacher to grow as someone in writing area or reading area with her students. She can support the kindergarten teacher who instructs in reading. So that coach can serve multiple purposes. She is great at analyzing data. So she supports teachers in grouping their students. She can help them with better practices in the classroom. Different buildings use them in slightly different ways, but in general, it's considered an embedded support to the staff. She can reach many students because she's supporting the teachers who work directly with those students.
Thank you.
Who else's hand is up, please? And down. My hand is up. I have a question because I'm concerned after going on the New York State Ed's website, looking at the percentage of literacy and the percentage of children who are proficient in this district. I don't even want to state what that is at this point. And I'm concerned that this area in particular was even touched. It seems like to me we need both, okay, because we're not reaching the thresholds that I feel, particularly after having the small classroom sizes out there for the past 3-4 years, that we did not, see significant growth in that as well. So it's it's concerning for me that we would be even talking about this area at all based on the data that's out there on the system at New York State. That's a concern for me. And, I'm not going to profess to say that I understand solely what you mean, but I can tell you this much. We're not seeing the results of it. Okay, and at one time we had over 100 reading teachers. We broke that down to 50. And about taking 50 down, another 6 or whatever, down to 44. But we're not seeing the results in our children. And this is an area that you can't do anything if you can't read. Okay, you can't do math, you can't do anything. So without doing some, I think this is an area that we really need to take another look at. And I think people need to be given goals, Dr. Cash. Recommendations are that we should alleviate or get rid of reading teachers. Then at the end of the day, when all the numbers are pulled together, there should be significant growth in the areas based upon their recommendation. There has to be some accountability here in regards to these decisions being made, because this is impacting the lives of children. And so, I'm uncomfortable about this reading piece, and I'm uncomfortable about math as well.
Colleagues, okay? I understand. Thank you for your comments. We certainly agree that reading is a critical skill, and we're talking about 6 teachers. There are different circumstances. Don't forget that the school-based management team has a voice in this as well. And we've been in a time where we have limited resources. We're going to always have to make choices. I wish we had all the money that we need as a district. I wish we had all that charter school money, $160 million, so that we could pay for all the reading teachers we wanted per school. We could get all the social workers and all the guidance counselors. We could load up with staff. But I can tell you this too, staff alone, there's no magical formula to just having more staff. You got to have really good staff. and then you got to be efficient, and then you got to practice, and you got to work at this work, and you got to have a responsibility at home, and then you got to do extra work. So it's everybody doing on this work. No school district has any magic formula for this. We've been increasing, but it's going to be a long time before you get to where you want with literacy in Buffalo. That's been 100 years issue of literacy in Buffalo. I see it all the time in adults. People say they graduated for something such. Well, don't let me know that, because you can't spell, you can't write, and you don't speak too well. And I'm just talking in general. So literacy and reading is a big issue, no question about it. But it goes beyond just staffing, and we're going to have to use a multiple array of ways to getting at this literacy. And we tried for 4 years to do literacy coaches. We have all kind of online programs to support students with literacy. We have training and professional development to support students with literacy. So that's where it is. This is a modest adjustment. Some of these are retirements. Some of these are school-based decisions, and we're talking about 5 or 6. And then where's the solution to it?
You're saying after the retirements are included in that 6 or in addition to it?
They're included.
Okay, Terrence Hurd has a question. Any other people, a board member with a question?
Terrence already asked all these questions.
As Sharon stated, literacy is a very important category that we need for our kids. And even down, I'd like to know, first of all, what's the cost saving if we release 6 reading teachers and literacy teachers? Are they being paid different, or what's the cost saving for each department if it's reading and literacy? Also, even down in Georgia, we work with universities like Emory University and bring literacy coaches and reading coaches over to adult programs. And have we reached out to like University of Buffalo, Buff State, to their teaching programs to have them come and help also, or say yes to Buffalo?
So 2 questions, 2 parts. First part is the cost. The rough cost is $600,000. The way you look at an FTE, just in round terms, Terrence, is one full-time professional FTE is approximately $100,000. Sometimes it could be a little more. So 600,000 is a round figure for 6 reading teachers. Okay? And then in terms of using other approaches, we have begun to do that. You want to talk a little bit about it? Will can talk about this. Ann can talk about it. The whole thing when we were talking about the Buffalo Literacy Corps and working with undergraduates and graduate students to work with small groups of students. We had that initiative going as in some of our schools. So yeah, that's a good point, Terrence, that we can use other entities to assist with the literacy and reading needs of our students. Colleagues who are listening in, Cassandra, anybody want to talk about this reading teacher issue in terms of what's in the budget now and how we believe that the impact is mitigated, that we'll be fine as long as we stay within these parameters? Anyone?
Absolutely, Dr. Cash. This is Cassandra. I just wanted to say that when
Dr. Wright, is that you, Dr. Wright?
This is me. Thank you.
Dr. Wright.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that in all of the situations wherein there was a reduction in the reading teacher, that position was replaced by what the building teams thought would make a greater impact on the school data. So for example, in at least 2 of those buildings, while they made a reduction in a reading teacher, they chose to have a social worker because the needs of the students were such that the socio-emotional issues were getting in the way of them being able to learn how to read. So they knew that meeting the children's needs in that respect would be more important than the reading teachers. We have to also understand that the reading teachers work with a very small number of students, while the social worker can have a much bigger caseload. Additionally, I'm not sure how some of this is transferring from what actually happened in the school-based budget to what the documents are that you're looking at, particularly you, Mrs. Woods. But in many of those schools, there was actually an increase in the amount of reading staff that they had from last year to this upcoming school year. So I'd have to see exactly what you're looking at. There, at school number 92, while it may appear that there was a reduction on paper, again, Dr. Cash has his equity holdback, and I know that he will be making physicians whole at that school as well. So for school number 97, with the understanding that there is a deeper need to support students in technology, particularly at his building, even before we knew that we would be in this situation concerning distance learning, he chose to just reduce that position. He has 2 reading teachers. He reduced it to 1.5 and then added a 0.5 technology integration teacher so that he could provide deeper supports for the students in that way. Now, kids use a lot of technology, MobiMax, Mayan, they use a lot of technology for their reading. So every decision that they made, they kept in mind how it would impact their data, and the school community made the decisions together. So when I'm hearing that they lost a reading teacher, I'm not sure if that's the language we should be using. I'm thinking that we should be saying, why did they make the decision to reallocate those funds? Because that's what it came down to, the reallocation of those monies so that they would have a bigger bang, a greater return on their investment with a different position.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a Larry Scott, and who else hand is up? You haven't lowered it, so that's why I don't know who is out there. Please lower your hand if you don't have a question. Thank you. Larry, board member, Larry Scott.
So I just need to clarify that many times this is a forced choice. I've been in several of these meetings at School 81 for my sons, and we have to choose a social worker, a counselor, a reading teacher over art teacher, music, and we need more of all of these teachers. My solution is currently the buildings are not able to choose not to have a literacy coach and choose a reading teacher over a literacy coach. They don't have the ability to do that unless my information is incorrect. So I'm proposing that buildings have the decision-making power to choose a reading teacher over a literacy coach.
Okay, we won't argue that right now. It's a reasonable proposal, but we'll have to look at it and take it, see if that can work. If it fits within the budget, I have no problem. You can, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
What I'm asking you to do tonight is, at the end of the day, is to vote a bottom line. That's how you do in a large school. So you vote a bottom line, and then there's flexibility to move some things around as long as it balances. And if that's something the board would want us to take another look at as a board, then we'll be happy to do that.
Yes, and thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Is that it? Let's move.
One board member.
Another hand is up. Mr. Hurd?
Yes,
I can be overruled.
Yes, one more question. I'm looking at that $1,000. I know a couple of reading teachers, and I don't think the salary comprised of that. So how much is that going towards material and towards salary and benefits?
100,000, you mean, Mr. Hurd?
That's what. Yes, 100,000.
Yeah, that includes benefits.
I just don't see the numbers being 100,000 for a reading teacher.
You think it'd be more?
No, I thought it'd be less.
Should be about.
I think it would depend on how veteran the teacher was, because the longer they're with us, the more their salary and benefits would increase. So I think Jeff is using a rough average.
Yes, it's an average.
Yeah, an average teacher salary is about $70,000, and then you would put another $30,000 in benefits on top. That's where the $100,000 comes from. So, and depending on where you are, how long you've been around, that determines your salary. But the average is around 70.
Okay.
Okay. All right, are we good? Okay.
Jeff, do you know where we are?
Well,
I think we completed the 12.5 and the 10.5.
Right. And then, to be honest, I'm not sure where we're going after that. If we wanted to go over some of the rest of the executive summary, or
well, what I would like,
the chairwoman and the board.
I think that we should. I do agree that we should look at the the 5 major expenses of this district, as well as the revenue funds and things that are available to help us with revenue. I think there's a need to have in this district a thorough conversation about ways that we should be generating money on a regular basis.
Right.
So I would like to know, I would like some information about the fringe benefits. I feel that that you've already touched somewhat on the charter schools. You've touched on transportation.
As big ticket items.
Personnel. Yeah,
right.
Those are big items. Those are the fringe benefit piece.
And insurance.
And insurance. So I thought I thought that under the fringe benefit piece that we were saving money there, but I don't see that at this point. So Jeff, what we're looking for are your big ticket items, okay? And then we want to talk about the various board members have concerns about funds and who we're working with in regards to this district. A part of this budget that deals with grants. I don't feel that we need to go over all the grants, but I do feel that we do need to highlight the new ones. Yes, Mrs. McCosey, you have a question?
I just would add that, Jeff, when you're going through all of this, so that, I don't know about anybody else, if I don't see like the page number that you're talking about, I'm just kind of listening. Can you just refer to the page number if there's a page number that you're working off of when you're going through this, so that I can read into it,
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay.
So my suggestion, Jeff, is you can look at the function code or the cost center. Those are where you will find the big ticket items. You talked about them. What do you want to do with them, President Common? You want us to just highlight them or let you know what?
If you just highlight them, because I think it's important that particularly our new board members who have not gone through such a massive budget before are aware, and maybe they are anyway because of certain jobs that they have or their exposure. But I really would like to talk about the efforts associated with the grants, because I feel that I'm not sure how we go about doing grants, but when I looked at these grants, I was thinking there be additional grants available for a school district. I'm just thinking about that. The fringe benefit piece, I'm concerned about the cost. And I did not hear us talk anything about the results of this corona on our employees. Are you anticipating that the costs are going to go up in regards to workman's comp or people being out sick? Is there a possibility that if we go back to school and we get into the second wave, have you taken into consideration anything associated with that into the budget? Okay, so things like that. Those are my concerns with the personnel piece, because I'm very concerned that we're going to need more staff to do what the things that I read. It appears that we're going to need.
Well, we may need to shift. The better way to think about it is from a management standpoint is we may need to shift resources when we come out or go through this. We're not going to be able to sustain everything we have and then add a whole bunch more. That just has to shift our thinking around that. Jeff, can you talk about, we have saved millions of dollars in the area of health insurance over the past several years. And just talk a little bit about insurance and then what we anticipate, because folks they're not going to the hospital right now, colleagues. They're not, the costs we're saving costs from this year for the rest of the year. But next year, we anticipate that those costs will start to skyrocket again. So just say a few things about what we've been doing to save money in that area and what we're anticipating, Jeff. 2 or 3 points.
Okay. Yep. Well, let me first, I want to, I'm going to jump back to the executive summary of the actual budget, because page 9 of 134 summarizes the major expenditure groupings that we have. And there's a table on there. So again, page 9 of 134. And you'll see at the top, there's a red bar that goes across the top, and a column that's highlighted in yellow shows for compensation, pension contributions, employee health insurance, retiree health insurance, other employee benefits, and then transportation, tuition, charters, debt service, and everything else. So that's the overall summary that kind of captures the major areas that we have. If you look at, and I can go through them pretty quick. So pension contributions are based on eligible salaries, which is teachers, administrators, teaching assistants, and then some exempt staff. It's eligible salaries multiplied by a rate that is set by the state. And for every dollar we spend, we contribute towards that pension. So that pension contributions are increasing $2.5 million or 8.6% from the prior year budget. That is almost exclusively related to an increase in the pension rate. And I suspect that with some of the stock market disruptions, that we may find that pension contribution rates for teachers go up even higher next year. But that's an 8.6% increase. Employee and retiree health insurance, I'm showing an increase of 1.7 million for employees, or 2.6%, 2 million for retirees, or 3.5%. And then I also have other employee benefits. So other employee benefits includes everything else from workers' comp to unemployment to things like that. Trying to think of what else offhand. The increase in that one's going up 2.3 million, and unemployment is really driving most of that. But employee and retiree health insurance throughout the market, 5 to 6% increases are pretty common. Now, let's, we've looked at other charts where we've shown that over the last 5 years, we've added probably about 700 staff. So we've increased our staff, and yet our health insurance costs over the last 5 years are relatively flat. A 2.6% or 3.5% are very small relative to where we were trending. And the superintendent already mentioned it, that and this is in our 4-year plan, we're about $20 million a year below where we were projecting just 3 years ago in terms of the costs. So we've done quite a bit to contain costs. So I'm going to set aside the executive summary for a minute, and then I'm going to go into the document that I sent out before this meeting, because Board Member Woods had several good questions on benefit costs that we explained in here. And on page, we'll go right to page 3 of 20, health insurance, $2 million increase. So, we do this a couple different ways. So one, I have, I have this table below on page 3 of 20. There's a table that basically does some calculations for how it does multi-year projections for health insurance. So I do this, and then I reach out to Lawley Insurance, that's our insurance broker, and I ask them, can you please tell me what is trending in the marketplace? What are you seeing from our data? What are you seeing from your other book of business data, other governments? What are you seeing across the state? So, you know, this is their work. Their work is doing projections and providing us solid projections that we can use to make sure that we cover appropriately the costs that we will incur. And then also they assist us a great deal with how we can have savings. Now, the one of the big things that we're seeing right now, and I just saw the first month where it hit, is that because of the coronavirus crisis, folks that would normally be getting elective procedures or going to the doctor for routine appointments, those things are all being canceled, and we're seeing a significant drop off in spending on these things. So April, it hit on the reports that I get, and then May and also June, we're predicting similar type of a slowdown. And probably there's not one person in this room that hasn't canceled some sort of appointment, that we would have normally gone to, but because we're working from home and everything's closed, we can't. So that shows up in real dollars when you consider that our overall medical insurance spend is about $140 million a year. And we have predicted that in both retirees and employees that there's going to be a $3 million bump that's going to hit next year. So all these costs that we're deferring now, so I projected in the 19-20 year to save about $6 million. It may end up being higher than that. Based on what April is, I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be higher. But the downside is those are costs that they're just temporary. They're just temporary deferrals. We will be spending these costs because people are going to go back to the doctor, going to have procedures and so forth. So we have a $3 million bump that I've included in, so on page 3 of 20, that I've included, and you can see it in the spreadsheet that I have. So I assume 1920 coronavirus related deferral added to 2021. So $3 million in retirees, I basically just added that on the top. Otherwise, retiree health insurance would have actually gone down. And again, in the marketplace, insurances have been going up at a 4 to 6% rate every year. I've got documentation that shows in New York for governments, it's been trending closer to about 6%. Again, we've been flat, essentially flat over the last several years. But for retiree health insurance, I've got a $3 million increase. And other than that, it's our projections are based on likely contributions based on our current population of retirees and assumed retirees. Some projected growth for Medicare Advantage. All that boils down into the number that we get. But otherwise, if we took away this deferral amount, retiree health insurance would have gone down. And we were at a pace at one point where this was growing unsustainably, retiree health insurance, where our biggest costs were basically retiree health insurance and employee health insurance and charter schools. This is going back about 5 years. And again, we've shown this over the last several years that with all the things that we've done, we've shifted it and moved so that way the investment and the spending that we're doing is in the classroom. So you'll see that on page 3 of 20 for retiree health insurance. And then also on page 4, I have a similar analysis that shows how we do the calculation for employee health insurance. And same thing, I'm including a $3 million bump that we expect will hit next year based on all the deferrals. And we have pretty good projections of what our contribution amounts are going to be. Contributions that'll be paid by others, whether they be Cobra or Westminster, which is under our plan. So a lot of details go into this, and that's really, this is in our 4-year plan as well, so you can see that. Now I'm going to jump over to page 5 of 20, and I'm not going to read all this just because it's pretty small, but we have done much over the last several years in terms of cost savings initiatives related to health insurance, and they're really all outlined in here. Each 4-year plan. So this one I pulled right out of the 4-year plan document, and I'm showing the notes from that I wrote in April, last month, and then 1 year ago. We can look in prior ones as well, and we can start to see the savings that we've accomplished in there. So there's quite a bit from better negotiated rates on rebates. We issued an RFP for Medicare Advantage. We've been converting a process where we're voluntarily converting retirees into a Medicare Advantage program that saves us $2,500 a year. And all we're doing is shifting more cost to the federal government and essentially providing them a better program, which is why many retirees are converting over into it. We've reduced the OPEB liability. That's our future unfunded liability by, I think, I wrote it down in here. I mean, it's $500 million. We were as high as 2.9 billion. I think it's about 2.4 right now. So significant savings there. And that's really when you look at all these small things that are done on an annual basis, that projects out into the future because retirees retire with whatever benefits they have in place when they retire. So the OPEB liability takes into account that folks that retire 10 years from now will have to pay contributions, and they're not going to, the plan will be different, and it'll be more aligned with, with what other governments are paying to their employees. So quite a few, we've done quite a bit on the health insurance side.
Okay, I think, whose hand was up first? Is it Larry? One up first. And Jennifer, your hand is up.
So I'm curious to know whether or not we've been able to see any type of savings or what the costs look like since we have a lot of folks working from home. I don't know if like travel, things like that fall under transportation, office space, whatever it is, that even the small things from being in the office, traveling to different meetings, all of that. Have we seen any costs from the last, do we have any like real data from the last couple months of just having to work from home as opposed to constantly being on the road or in office buildings or whatever? Has there been any, any real major changes? I'm not talking like $10 a week. I'm talking major changes. It's been a while since folks have had to kind of do the remote thing.
Is that question with respect to health insurance or other costs?
No, I asked that because I was looking at this, the 9 of 134, and I'm looking at all the different pieces, and I'm looking at transportation and compensation and things like that, and I feel like that question kind of falls into a lot of that, and I wanted to get that out before we dug into the insurance. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't lose my window to ask that. It might be a trivial question, but it's something that I was.
A good question. When we brought the budget to the board, we also included the third quarterly report, which outlines that outlines the financial results to date in our 1920 year. I did not send that to everybody today, so I don't know how quickly or how easy it would be. That would be it, yes. So that document actually outlines that we're projecting a $30 million surplus in the 1920 year, where initially, we had predicted a small loss, and then I think in December, roughly about break even. So significant savings are accruing for not paying for transportation. Our sub costs are down. The health insurance, we did speak about that. So the health insurance costs are lowered, but that's probably a one-time thing. And then we don't really know what coronavirus may impact, if that impacts and raises costs down the road just based on the disruption to health insurance overall. So yeah, there are significant savings. Contracts as well. We've been asked to look at all of our contracts, and if we've got a contractor that's supposed to be working with someone and they can't, well, then that contract, we shouldn't be paying on it. So that's a lot of small things that are adding up. But yeah, we are predicting significant savings in the general fund in the 1920 year as a result of the work from home.
Okay, any other questions? If someone's hand is up, please lower your hand. Lou Petrucci?
Thank you, Sharon. Just along the same lines, Jeff, with respect to the district's additional expenses as it relate to the coronavirus, are there any discussions about potential reimbursements down the line from either the state or the federal government as they are reimbursed?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're looking into is FEMA reimbursement for, now this FEMA would cover costs like, our cleaning, sanitizing, right, supplies and materials. I'm not sure how that would impact or change, like for health insurance, that if an employee were to contract coronavirus while working, if that would alter or change that. That's a question though I'm going to follow up with our insurance folks on, so I can answer that, because I don't know for certain what the impact might be on that.
And one more thing, just because transportation came up earlier, I know we're seeing savings, but we're going to have less of a reimbursement. So doesn't this impact us 2 years out then, unless there's changes?
It does.
The funding formula?
Yeah, and I don't expect the funding formula to change. The governor keeps trying to change the formula to cap it and to make it more harmful. So, but what's going to happen is that if we don't spend 15 million in transportation in 1920, we're not going to get about 13.2 million in transportation reimbursement in the next year. So you'll see that in our predicted revenues that I've got a reduction of, I have a reduction of 13 million for transportation. So those are dollars that are not going to be received next year. And then what's worse is that if hopefully we do start up again and start transporting students and that's not disrupted, but we're going to have essentially a low reimbursement year in 2021, offset against a new contract that has higher costs. So we're kind of getting a double whammy on the expenditure side for transportation. So that's that's to be determined how that ultimately goes. But that's one of the reasons why it's appropriate to use fund balance in the 2021 year, because we've got these kind of one-time events that are disruptive and there's really no other way around that. I don't see the state.
What the fund's for things like that, one-time unforeseen circumstances, not something that's structural, that's going to go on and on.
Exactly.
Right, that's right.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Next hand up was, 2 hands raised, no? No questions?
My hand raised. I have a quick question.
Okay, yes. Okay, please lower your hands, please.
Jeff, my quick question is that when I asked in your response, you said that when I asked about cleaning supplies and sanitation materials, we're gonna have to clean all the buildings after each kid comes in if we return to the building. You said that would be covered by FEMA revenues, and you said that they're not included in the proposed budget. So just a quick question, will that be an unanticipated revenue that maybe if it comes in, we'd have some funds to do some other items and things that we need to get done? Revenues.
Hold on. Go ahead, Jeff. You go, and then I have a comment.
Yeah, I didn't include the expenditures or the revenue. So to the extent that we get revenues, it would only be for expenditures that we incur. So I didn't budget for the expenditures, and that may be something that we do have to do. That when we get ready to start the school year up, that we need to go deeper than we have in the budget in terms of supplies, and ultimately that could go above what we had budgeted, and then any revenue would just offset those additional costs.
Okay, any additional
Paulette?
questions?
Paulette,
Thank you. You're saying it's a wash. I'm looking for
Okay.
more revenues, but you said it's a wash. No problem.
Yeah.
I thought you found $1 million today, Paulette. On a roll.
That's a different question that I believe Jeff will either bring up that he had a discussion with Dr. Cash. It's an accounting adjustment that they can choose to make. Adjustments
Okay.
they can.
no, I'm good. I misunderstood your question. I thought it was you were concerned about us not having enough hospital level, quality levels cleaning supplies for next year, given that this was likely to continue. And I heard, that's what I heard. And what I wanted to say is, in the last board meeting, you agreed with the board item that we will purchase additional supplies, quite a bit of it, and they will be of the upgraded nature, as well as hand sanitizer, gloves, and so forth. And we already had a big storage of cleaning supplies right now. So we're in pretty good shape for probably the first half, certainly the first quarter of the new year before we would have to order more.
Okay, no other questions? All right. All right, so Jeff, are we at the point, Dr. Cash, where we could have our open discussion about or school-based budgets or whatever? I would like to, if we're at that point, Jeff.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I would like to say that after passing the resolution of equity at our last meeting, that it's very concerning for me. Two schools that are our CSI schools, comprehensive schools in need of improvement, whose staff was reduced significantly. Our staff was reduced by 9. MST staff was reduced by 9, and Burgard staff was reduced by 12.5.
No.
Schools looking at it. Okay, and so there's a concern. And so when you say that your ASL has had significant conversations and whatever, for me to see those two schools to come before us.
We would not cut. We didn't cut that many people from those two schools.
Looking at it, I didn't make it up.
Right here in front of me.
I'm looking at it. Go to page 110, people. And page 118 in the budget of 134, they're there. And that's a concern for me. A concern for me.
It would be a concern for me.
I'm just letting you know. Math, science, technology down 9.
No.
And Burgard down 12.5.
Nope. Toya, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm here. So,
are we down?
These schools?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Toya.
Good evening, everyone. This is Toya. In working with these schools, we went over their budgets repeatedly. They work very closely with their school-based budget team. So they really, we looked at where they were in 2019-20 and where we wanted to be for 2021. We do realize that they had some increases that came out of 18-19 that we really wanted to revisit. And some of them opted to think about rolling some of those into their school-based budget. So you see a shift in some of their FTEs. And then Dr. Cass has also mentioned earlier that there are some schools that are high priority that we always want to revisit. And I've sat with them and gone over each one of their requests to make sure that we have it documented, that equity holdback, if we were to support them and what they think they need now, that we would be ready to do that, and we have all that information. I will say that it was also mentioned that, you know, with this COVID-19 global health crisis that we're in right now, that what school leaders and their teams think they need now is constantly changing and very fluid. So even some of the requests up until last week that schools have they've actually changed slightly because they're looking at the use of more technology to support
the learning that students have been engaging in for this second ladder of the school year. So we anticipate that going into the summer that their needs will even shift further, and that they will be able to adjust them and really look at that equity holdback. And we have all of that documented. So they do have a number of staff members that are in that category, FTEs, that we're looking to restore. We're looking at what they had in 2019, 20, going to 2021. And for example, for MST and for Burgard, that does include, for example, the art and music FTEs. They do have some, but we want to increase them to make sure they go back to what to restore. That's part of the discussion around the equity holdback.
Okay, so with these particular schools,
5.71 for MST and 6.2 for Burgard.
I don't know what you have, okay, but I'm looking at what you gave me, and in 1920 you had 75.46, and the total for 2021 is 66.22. Okay, now the things I'm concerned about, Dr. Cash, is that your staff's the charge to go out and bring back the bacon and reduce to everything or whatever, that these two particular schools, you know, were hammered. I didn't see one change in city honors. As a matter of fact, I saw an increase in staff. And I didn't see also a similar thing that happened with Olmsted. And so from my perspective, and since I wear the equity banner every day, I have a concern that as a result of providing certain resources into those buildings, MST's formal suspension rate went from 77 to 5. Okay, that was a result of the social emotional supports that were put in there. It changed the culture within that building. And to receive a budget for me, early after we were promised that there would be a baseline moving forward last year, in which both of these schools combined have upwards of 21 cuts in them, is really a slap in the face for me. So I feel like I'm doing the caddy.
But we haven't done that.
What was it, Caddyshack, where you keep going over and over and over again? I feel like I'm going over this.
Well,
but it must be a misunderstanding because
last year, look at the responses that we gave you this afternoon. Last year, I heard them. No, it's right there in the responses. Go down where you have that slide that's in gray for East, MST, Burgard, and I don't know. I think the fourth one was iPrep or maybe School
International
31.
Prep.
Look at all those FTEs that I put in last year. You were with me in those meetings.
I absolutely was there. Was surprised to see that they were removed.
They're not removed.
Conversation. It was certainly the typist is gone. I'm looking at the reduction in the and all sorts of. Here's what my concern is, Dr. Cass. The message wasn't clear.
They took some kind of whooping or something.
Well, listen.
I gave them more than any other school in the whole system last year. By far.
You gave 4 schools. You gave 4 schools significant support after the board requested it. At that point, we were told that there would be a baseline in those schools. And that has not happened as of this budget. So what you're asking us to do, or you're asking me to do, is approve a budget where your ASL, okay, has worked to reduce now both of these schools 12.5 and 9, and I'm majorly concerned about this. I'm concerned about the message that it sends to the staff, as what it sends to the board. If we're going to move these schools in an equitable way, we have to start providing the resources there.
Those schools are more than that.
77 formal suspensions to 5 by coincidentally.
They get more than any other school.
They're working with Johns Hopkins. They're working, they need the supports in these schools. And I can't drill this enough. These schools have to have the support, international prep. And I want to say also, while I'm talking about this, one of the reasons Newcomer was established, the reasons that Pathway was established was because of the impact that they had on the bed code in the buildings that they were in. And so they were extracted and new bed codes were requested and they were established to help the schools increase their graduation rates. What I don't want to see happen is the same thing happens again, because we are adding these back into it, these other students into it, and we end up going into the same situation we had in
we agree with that. We support that.
Okay. I mean, you know, that's where I am with this, and I'm surprised that it was submitted. And I really reached out to the ASL. For whatever reason, we didn't get a chance to talk to each other. But to have this presented, particularly after the board, the previous board, put baseline in, is a major concern for me. That maybe the message is not clear. That there are certain children who, when you're sending children in to a building, who are reading at a level 1 at a high school level, that they need smaller classrooms and they need more support.
They got all of that. We will not diminish the supports to MST and Burgard. Guaranteed.
That's what it looks like. Everybody's taking a look at it. They see it just as I see it.
They are supported fully.
They will be.
Within this budget, yes.
Within the next, yeah, okay, because that's going to be major. Okay, and I just want that. I want that to be clear to your ASLs as well. That it's not okay when a school is in high need that they are not given the proper massaging that they need.
That's right. That's right.
Thank
all
you.
These schools are fragile. All of them.
Well, certain ones are more. When the state is looking at us as they are with our 3 receivership schools, I certainly expect for the ASLs to provide the additional supports for them.
Absolutely.
Up front, not behind the scenes. Thank you.
You had all the schools in receivership a couple years ago.
I'm well aware of that. I walked it, okay?
That's right.
You're not telling me something I don't know. But I can tell you one thing, you're not going to get out of receivership if you don't recognize that there are certain things that need to be in those buildings. I'm taking a look right now at high school. You've got 3 schools over there, Dr. Cash. None of them have music. Not one of the schools there have music.
You got the best music teacher in the city at MST. You hear me?
At Burgard?
MST.
You have several great teachers, music teachers.
No, music.
To go into those schools.
That's
okay.
Right.
So they are all very talented.
Okay.
But that is why the culture was changed in those buildings. That's why you don't have the suspensions that you have, the behavior issues, because the culture in those buildings was changed. How do you go for years without even providing basic music in a building?
Budget permitting, we're going to keep all that going and more.
We have to permit that. That has to be permitted.
All right.
0.5 and 9, it has to be permitted.
Okay. Check your hands, Ms. Cotman.
Yes, sir.
You see anybody?
Hands up. Heard.
Okay.
Woods.
Yes, Jeffrey, I'm concerned about the how our federal disaster aid was spent, and I know that we used it to offset some things. Our federal disaster relief aid, how that was spent. I know we used it to offset some things in our budget, but I'm not quite sure how that money was spent. I believe under your report is $29.6 million, and how we can use that. You know, if there any.
That's for next year.
We haven't received it and we haven't spent it.
It's for next year.
Yeah, but this is for next year budget. We're talking about how can we utilize that aid to become.
If we get it. We get it.
I'll see the information.
If we get it, we'll try to restore a lot of this. If we get it and nothing else changes. But that was just the first part of the stimulus package. We're up to number 4 or number 5. And the big one for education is still being wrangled in Washington right now. We haven't gotten any final answer on it. All that would do is go back to restore the cut that the governor took out for us at the 6% cut. That's what created the $89.6 million gap. If the governor gives us back $29.6 million, then I expect and nothing else occurs, that we can restore some of these cuts that we've made. And we'll bring that back to the board.
Okay.
That's when you can have that discussion that Larry wants to have. That's where we can give those 75 people back to MST and Burgard that Ms. Cotman's talking about. And we can do a whole lot of conversation if we get that money. And that's what we'll do. But we got to start getting disciplined into making some tough decisions. We really do. I'm going to make sure that those schools are taken care of. There's no question about it. None.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, whose hand is up before Mr. Petrucci's? Will your hand up?
I think Paulette had something.
Mm-hmm. Then Mr. Petrucci.
Dr. Cash, since the things we're looking at on our school-based budget, you're saying they're not, maybe they're not accurate. So let me just ask you, is it accurate that Marva Daniels School 37 is losing an a position in administration? I looked at the population of the school. It is going up. I know administration is assigned based on, population, but it tells me this budget says they're losing an administrator. And I just wanted to be sure, see if is that true? Same thing for Charles.
You on, Paulette?
On page 75, school-based budget, Marva Daniels School 37. One of our favorite schools, we know.
So Cassandra, you take a look at it, and Jeff, you take a look at it, and let me know
Also,
are you referring to an assistant principal? Because that's part of my holdback as well.
Yes.
Some of these assistant principals. Is that what you're referring to?
Mrs. Wood?
Yes.
So technically that school is only slated to receive one assistant principal, but for the past several years, Dr. Cash has always funded an additional assistant principal. And I know that he will be funding that additional assistant principal for the 2021 school year.
So it shows me two, but this holdback that Dr. Cash has, which is sitting on what budget line, Dr. Cash? Anyway, but you're saying but you're saying that that's not going to be realized. You're going to give them back that the administrator.
To the degree that we can. I have given 11 APs to schools that requested them over the last 3 years, 11 that were unbudgeted. And we used some of that, not the only thing, but some of that and the other requests that were made, we used to help move those schools. Many of these schools moved from persistently poor performing and in the red to good standing. Many of these schools. So we're trying to keep it. It's fragile. It's very fragile.
Yes, it is.
That would include Charles Drew, which moved from the red. It was a persistently high-need school. It moved to the green, but it shows they had 3 administrators, and they're moving down to 1. So that's why I'm asking. Reports we're looking at, you're saying they're not accurate, that you have your holdback, and that this is not going to be reality, because I won't have a problem if you give them back the resources they need.
Jeff, we did something there with about 0.7. We went from 11 to 5. I think we cut 6 out. We didn't cut all 11. We cut 6 out of the budget per se. But talk to me about that. I think I have some in the holdback.
Yes, you do. Each one of these assistant principals is in the holdback right now. So the funding is in the budget. The principals or the assistant principals are not allocated into the school-based budget. And then we're holding those at this point, and that's typical this time of year. for that decision to look at, do each of these schools still need it? Typically they do. There's not a lot of changes in these from year to year, but yes, these, so if you go through and find other schools that you see administrator down by one, I bet you I can find it as in this list of the items that we have in this holdback for the superintendent to allocate.
Then maybe that explains why when we look at Burgard, for instance, they're down in administrator, they're down clerical support, they're down at aid and assistant, they're down at English teacher, they're down a math teacher, they're down a social studies teacher, they're down an art teacher, they're down a world language teacher. When Sharon said to you what we're reading went from 80 down to 67, which FTEs, which is 13, I'm reading the documents that you supplied. So if there's some magical place in this budget where this holdback is showing, I'd love to see the line.
Wait a minute, reading went from what to what, Ms. Woods? From 80 to 50. What did you say?
I'm saying their overall needs went from 80.6 the current year, 2019-20, to 67. A cut of 13 positions, and I could just read them to you. That's why I was like, the school, who did she tick off? I couldn't understand it. When I looked at Jen's school, I saw some of the same things, and I just said, Jen, what's wrong with Lafayette? Who'd they tick off? And then I'm looking at my waterfront school, and you know, I'm looking, and this is for the school-based budgets. You know, Waterfront did not lose an administrator, but under your extended learning summer and Saturday programs, from 306,000 down to, okay, 33 in the school-based budget, and evidently you're making them use a grant. Is there a grant somewhere? But they're still losing these $50,000 in the summer and Saturday programs, and there are several school-based budgets that show that also. So it would be nice if we could understand why some schools are losing up to 50% of the funding in their extended learning summer and Saturday programs, and some people aren't losing anything. That, for me, that was an equity question.
That's a good one. I don't understand that would be happening. Is that happening, Jeff?
Yeah, let me, you know, Mrs. Woods, what you're also missing with Burgard, so there's two things here. You know, one, the superintendent said, so Burgard has provided a list of additional staffing that they say they need. The other piece that you didn't note in there is that they're down about 60 students, and that works out to about 6.5 staff. Because as a district, as we lose students, and we have over the years, that changes. Students drive what gets allocated to schools. And obviously you could take it to its logical conclusion that if there were no students, you would have no staff. So
but wait, where are you looking? Because I only have the material you gave me. I'm looking, since you picked that school, I'm looking at Burgard's school-based budget. Their population says they went up to 479, and the principal says they actually have 489. So
no, they actually,
I don't understand. I'm reading your material, so somebody tell me something.
Yeah, they actually have 441 students right now. They have so they have a generous budget at 479 next year.
Based on what? Are you talking about best code, Jeff? Best code day?
Yeah, that's their actual enrollment.
So when I started doing this, I did call and find out that there's 489 students enrolled at Burgard right now.
I would have to.
And you sent one yesterday. You sent one yesterday who needs physics over there, and the person can't get in there needing physics. So I actually contacted both of these principals because I really didn't believe these numbers, and I thought that that these numbers were incorrect. And I spent significant time on the New York State's website yesterday, as well as talking to principals trying to find out what was going on. And they were assured that Dr. Cash was going to add these things in. So they weren't concerned until I guess I called them, and I'm sure that concerned them. But that's what we have, and we're talking about this. Why don't we consider, Jeff, changing the way we're doing budgeting? Dr. Cash has said on a number of occasions that what we're doing here is antiquated. Using the beds day code rate or whatever, your beds day count, to move budgets, and additional staff is added in. I mean, additional children are added in, but no staff is added in over the years. Are we doing something a little backwards? Because why would we have 489 listed at registration right at downtown at the registration office for this school, and you're telling me that's not what we have? I'm trying to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, registration. Also counting students that leave. Are they counting what they started the year with, and then they're adding up every student that arrived after, or are they actually counting the enrolled students at the point in time? So, and that's that's not uncommon. We've seen that sometimes it seems like every school says they grow during the year, and then when you look at it, the district continues to shrink. And these schools do as well. I mean, this data, I feel pretty comfortable with this data. And the budget for Burgard next year is still based on 479 students.
So you feel good about reducing staff in that building by 12 and a half people?
The superintendent just said to you that he would add back whatever staff is necessary, but we don't even necessarily know how many staff will be there next year.
School.
Colleagues, we do this pretty much, we've done this every year now for a few schools, and I think when you look up at that box, look at the transparency box. That's the New York State formula of every school-based budget. You see that up there in the upper left-hand corner? It basically asks the question, is a school a high-need school and underfunded? And we went through all of our 60 schools based on the New York State formula, adjusted transparency formula, and I believe almost all of our schools right now, based on that formula, because you have to have an equity formula coming from somewhere. I don't say it's perfect. I think there's flaws in that one, and there certainly would be flaws in anything we would try to come up with. It says that it's not a high need. It's a high need school, but it's not underfunded. And so I don't intend to having any of these schools be radically, that whole thing we talked about 5 years ago, Sharon, a tale of two cities, a tale of two schools. You had a tale of two school system a few years ago, no question about it. But we have grown. Look at remember the graph that we showed you just a week or two ago. We have grown by 720 staff. 720 staff over the last 4 years. And that in large part is done for a whole lot of reasons, class size reduction, the new education bargain, strong community schools, equity issues that we were trying to rectify, and we still have a way to go. We're not perfect. We haven't got it all straightened out yet. So we're going to continue to try to make it happen if God allows and if this budget holds. That's where we are right now, colleagues, if this budget holds. And I just don't want us wrangling at each other. We all agree here. We're on the same team. We're on the same team.
I agree. I appreciate the work you've done, Dr. Cash, and I don't want to appear disrespectful to you at all. But I have major concerns when I see that being submitted to the board. That's major when you drop that type. That should never have been board in that form. Okay, who's up next? I'm sorry.
Dr. Cash, can you please answer the question? Because I'm just looking at Stanley Mikowski, which you still have as a high need school. It's in the red. Understand the logic behind the extended learning summer and Saturday programs, why they've dropped from 113,000 in 18-19 down to 63 this year, and for this budget down to 18,000. They're losing like 40 over 40 grand. Same problem with Harriet Tubman. These are my struggling schools, and you're just wiping out their
significantly reducing and eliminating their extended learning summer and Saturday programs. And I know we have to make cuts, but I'm just trying to understand why that one and my school 17 also get cut down to only 18,000. They're all losing 20, 30, 40, $60,000. But then if I go to some of these other schools, they're not losing.
Give me an example.
Okay, well, best technology is also losing. I want you to know they're dropping down. They're dropping from 102,000 down to 28. So these are four of my babies that have problem schools. So they are significant.
Is that a community school issue, or is that the transportation part that we were going to take out of ELT? What is Ms. Woods talking about?
For Mikowski, I'm not quite sure. I apologize. I probably should know this.
She's talking about
it's on your school-based budget, Jeff. Just go down to, after you do the FTE summary, then you have a thing called parent involvement. The second line is, the third line says, learning summer and Saturday programs. I know you're saying you don't want to have a lot of after-school activities or whatever, but it didn't make sense that these four troubled schools are getting significantly cut and almost wiped out.
In what?
Extended learning, summer and Saturday programs. But
extended learning?
Here's an example, Charles Drew. Yeah. Their Saturday programs is increasing. They're going from 220,000 to 23,000. So I don't understand I don't understand how this is allocated, why some of my schools are getting hit very hard and other schools are not.
They lost half a position.
In that line? Or are you talking about in the ELT line, Paulette?
It says ELT summer and Saturday, ELT extended learning, and the Saturday and summer and Saturday programs. It's one line. It's on everybody's budget, and some people are not getting touched. I'm not gonna let you pick up my city hours, Sharon. But some people are not getting cut, and the lowest struggling schools are.
We're not trying to touch some and not others. That's go ahead, Jeff.
That's quite possibly related to, so Stanley Mikowski, I'm still looking at that one. So they had what I believe to be a SIG grant that expired. And that's probably where a lot of the ELT in summer programming was. But I also notice in here too, there's a professional and curriculum development. So there may be, it appears as though there's a significant increase from 1920 to 2021. So that may have been a choice the school made to allocate funds from ELT in summer to professional and curriculum development. So I don't know that for certain, but that to me, that's
take a
going
look
one
at
up by 50,000, the other's down by 50,000.
Okay, take a look at Harriet Russ Tugman. These are the struggling schools I have, and they're caught. Their extended learning summer and Saturday program is cut down to the 18,000, and their professional development, curriculum development is eliminated also.
Colleagues,
I just don't get it.
ASLs are on the line for these schools, okay? So Contan.
Okay, thank you.
Contan has Harriet Ross Tubman. Cassandra has Futures number 37. And we can talk about any of these schools. The ASLs right in on all of these budgets. So any of you that are listening, jump in on Mikowski, on Futures,
and Waterfront, and Waterfront.
And Waterfront. Cassandra?
5731.
Cassandra, navigate with your colleagues.
Okay, so Mrs. Woods?
Yes?
Could you explain to me one more time, you're concerned about the Mikowski after-school budget for next year, the ELT budget?
Okay, there is a line on the school-based budget,
Okay.
and it's on
What
all
page,
the school.
what number are you on, Paulette?
I'm on page 10, Mikowski is page 104,
Thank you.
so everybody can follow it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, after they do the FTEs, they have items called supplies, then they have parent involvement, and the third item is the extended learning and summer and Saturday programs. And Kowski, as well as the other schools, are being reduced to $18,000 in that area. They were at $63,000 this year, but they're dropping. That's about 40 grand.
Okay. So Mikowski does not have Saturday academies. They are not a community school. And right now we're planning a different type of extended learning time. And I'm sure that that's where those reductions came into play. But for every school, a certain percentage of students are eligible to attend the extended learning time program, and Mikowski is included. And then the schools are funded based on that number.
So you're saying it dropped from $63,881 down to 18 based upon not getting what?
We are planning for a different type of extended learning time experience for next year. And that will dramatically reduce the amount of money that need to be budgeted for the program.
Okay.
Which is happening at all schools.
And it's happening across the district, that's right.
Let's see if Keith has an answer. I know I've been working with Jeff every day. I'm writing him off on my tax returns. But Jeff, is Keith there?
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can have Keith on mute, and he can explain probably a lot of these better than any of us can, because he knows the inner workings of the documents.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Speak up,
okay.
Keith.
So for what has happened in the 1920 year, pupil transportation was budgeted in school-based budget under ELT, and with the transparency, it's been removed. So of their budget of $63,000 at School 99, 46,000 of that is for pupil transportation that now is not budgeted at the school level, but comes off the top. And the same thing with 37. That was an amount of money for pupil transportation for the ELT program to get the kids home. That's no longer budgeted at the school levels with the transparency.
That's helpful, Keith.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Board Member Woods, are you okay? I'd like to move to Mr. Petrucci. His hand has been up for a while.
She said she was okay.
I don't understand why it isn't consistent, because when you go to waterfront, if it's transportation that's being, the waterfront dropped from 106. Okay.
What page?
Waterfront is 102. Waterfront got cut from 306,000, and you put it down to 33,000. They got a grant to push it back up to 68,000. You're saying all these changes in this line is all because of transportation?
They have more students.
But at Waterfront, they lost $33,000 because of transportation. They have an Empire grant that pays for their after-school program. So they may be doing other additional things. I don't know what they're doing at that school, but they have money put in there that comes from the grant that does not come from the general fund for their program.
Can you just look at one more, page 66, best.
I need, what
best.
school? I'm
Best.
sorry,
Oh,
what school?
6, number 6.
School 6?
School 6. They're dropping from 102,000 down to 28. That's all transportation?
School 6, 24,000 of theirs is in transportation that will come out. And they also had money put in there from their PSSE grant, additional money in ELT, and that is not expected to be back next year. That was supposed to end last year, and they gave it an extra year. So their money has changed from that. Now, as far as how they determine next year's budget, ELT provided me the numbers, but I can tell you that's some of the big differences.
Okay.
All right, Sharon, go ahead. I'm just losing 80,000 in my poor
I
school.
understand, but trust me, you got schools that got everything they want. Next, Lou Petrucci.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay.
Can I get some of those schools that get everything they need or want?
I know
Sharon?
that's right. Can we get one over here in the ferry? Thank you, Lou.
Real quick, I have two concerns. One is a fragile school in my district, 33, the Bilingual Center Bilingual Academy. I mean, they were a high need schools. They are no longer. I don't want them to go back. Overall, the budget in terms of the staffing has been pretty consistent, but the one cut that we did receive was in the bilingual clerk in the office. So the bilingual clerk in the office is key because they're the gateway. There's where all my Spanish-speaking parents come. They're the first point of contact. Oftentimes, if we don't have the bilingual clerk typist in that area, they have to pull out teachers or pull out another Spanish-speaking individual to come and attend to the parents' needs. So it's very disruptive during the course of the school day. So that is my one concern. I mean, thank you. I mean, they've got a increase in funding or increase in staffing, but the one staff member that we did lose was at that level, and it is a fragile school because of where it was and where it is now. I don't want them to repeat.
Yeah, Lou, that's a good point, but I think there might be a backstory to that. Jamie, do you have any information on that? And
what school, Lou? What school?
33?
33.
I have a bilingual academy on Elk Street, Sharon.
Thanks.
Jamie, are you there?
Hello.
I heard her say yes. Jamie, and also the ASL. Cassandra, who's got 33?
Is it Darlene?
I have 33 at all of the bilingual schools. And
Yeah.
I guess, so she did make the request as an unbudgeted request that we will be evaluating once the budget has been approved.
That's what it is, Lou. It's an unbudgeted request, and we'll have to take a look at it. When we have all these cuts, I wasn't able to fund that.
All right. Second, no, I appreciate it because it's something that would be valuable, again, to the overall consistency of the instructional integrity at the school. School 67, my alma mater school I went to, their algebra program. I see that their math teachers were decreased by 1.2 in the 2021 budget. And the math department was decreased by 1.2 positions. I'm told that it may be in the algebra department. I know that's a very popular program for many of my students that attend 67. I'm just concerned or hope that we can maintain that program.
Yes, that's an innovative program. We want to continue that there under Kathy. Darlene, are you there?
I am, Dr. Cash. That is part of our that we put into our request that we will be going over with you. So that is included.
All right.
All right. Thank you very much. Those are my two concerns.
Mr. Petrucci. Would you take your hand down if you, okay, thank you. Is Mr. Hurd, was your hand up as well? Okay.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. My question is for Jeffrey. I'm sorry. This is for Jeffrey. I've been on the phone with a lot of teachers from charter schools, and they have received letters and very concerned about their cutbacks also. From my understanding, charter schools going to make a lot of cuts in their administrative staff and teachers. So how would that affect our going forward about charter school tuition, and will we save money there that we can get back into the district?
The charter school tuition is based on the pupil counts that they have. What they do with that tuition, I can't speak to. So if they have fewer students, we'll pay less tuition, and then theoretically they'll have less available to pay for teachers or administrators or other staff. So I can't speak to what they'll do, but if a charter school thinks that they're shrinking, they're going to lose students, then that could be a possibility, and that's reflected in our tuition payment to them. It wouldn't show up anywhere else in our own budget.
Payment. So when will we find out numbers from the charters? If their staff were not able to sustain the amount of children that they have.
We have projections in the budget for each charter school, but similar to our own schools, in the fall, certain number of students show up at each school, and it usually takes a couple months for it to shake out. But some charter schools, we saw this with the Loma D. Johnson Charter School a couple of years ago, they just could not hold on to their students, and eventually that brought them to the conclusion that they should shut the building down. So it usually takes at least probably till July, September, usually November, you start to get a feel for what the student counts are at the charter schools by then.
Okay. We also have a report out that some of our private schools also looking to merge around our area in the city of Buffalo. So they might merge, and we also might have an opportunity to receive some of those students also. If charter schools are on the verge of downsizing themselves, they won't be able to sustain the students, which will come back to us. So I'm just looking to see how we can take those monies, and maybe reach out to charter schools possibly, and see what their goals are, what their expectations are going to be, for the fall, for 2021, and how we can adjust, with our staffing and monies.
Right. You got an ad hoc committee on charter schools. Promote the district. Promote the district. Recruit students just like they do. Recruit the students. Tell them about all the good things going on here in the Buffalo public. Student equal revenue. That's
okay, I'm sorry, a hand was up before Jennifer. Who was next? Okay, if not, it's Jennifer, Vice President's turn.
So along those lines, and just correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, isn't it that once, the charter schools receive their monies, that we really don't have any, they're not obligated to tell us really what they do with it, right? So even if we try and inquire and reach that branch out there, I think that what I've already known based on conversations and being in the community, but then also what I know folks are uncovering, and I'm quite sure the Charter Ad Hoc Committee is working on this, there hasn't been really a lot of communication around what monies, the charter schools can do, give up or show, or even tell us what they do to spend money on their students. We don't know what they're resourcing. They're not obligated to tell us. Connections where that can be, who can tell you or put that together. I think that would be awesome, because pre-Dr. Cash, this has been an issue from day one. This is part of the public charter issue, is that there is no real communication or collaboration with many of the schools because of whether or not that school in particular doesn't want to talk to anybody, or whether they're mandated not to. We don't understand, and I'm not saying me as if I'm speaking for everybody. I'm just saying, just as a parent advocate, just as a public school advocate, but then also sitting on the board, I get frustrated every time we talk about how much money goes into charters, and we're not even allowed to find out what's happening with that money, how that money is being allocated for each and every student, whether or not that student gets what they need. And then, to your question around how can we, get teachers to move from place to place, like just having that baseline conversation of where does this $150 million go when it goes to your building, I think is very clear. And I'm glad that that particular point came up, Terrence. I'm glad you brought it up, only because that needs to be said consistently in order for us to be able to, in this crisis, and in my role on the Fiscal Stability Ad Hoc Committee, we have to find out where all of our money is going. When it leaves, when it leaves the Buffalo Public Schools, where it goes, and with a significant amount that we know we put into charter schools, we just need to know, especially when you send them back to the Buffalo Public Schools, where was that money being allocated for those children who might have needed extra special resources? Did they get them? And if money was, did their IEP require monetary resources? And do we get, help us out? But we don't even get that kind of information from what I gather. So correct me, anybody, if I'm wrong, but this is a narrative I've been hearing forever. And Terrence, I think it'd be great if we can get to that point. But I'm going to put it out there that I haven't seen even, we ain't built the bridge in order to make that happen on either side, because it doesn't exist. So we need to get the land in place to build that bridge to make these questions real.
All right. Thank you, Vice President Makusi. Is there another hand up, or is that it? There's one hand raised. Is that it? So if all minds are clear, may I have Nate, I'm ready to move forward. May I have a motion to accept the proposed preliminary budget for 20? A motion and a second, please. So who?
Colleagues, I believe you need a number. Jeff, do they have the bottom line number? That's what they're approving. 954 million?
Yeah, the general fund's $954.7 million.
Okay.
That's what they have to approve.
And it's in board docs. It's posted, it's public.
It's already in public. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anyone move?
I have a question before we vote. We can. I have a question concerning our youth programs in the city of Buffalo. Where are we at with that, and would funding be cut back from our programs for like MBK or my brother's keeper, or those type of programs that we have, associated with our children?
Those are grant funded programs, and we have not cut those back in this budget.
Okay. Thank you.
There we go.
All over again. Okay, Jennifer Makusi, no, yes. I can't hear you. Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to get an update? I know I had asked on an update for the few presentations that we received where athletics is concerned around Pagula Sports. There was money coming in for that. AdPro and the different things with AdPro. I know we voted on these things. There's different monies that I know are floating around, and I'm just wondering whether or not we're utilizing those monies, or because of what's going on, utilizing them. Are they still with us? Did they leave with the relationship that was previously, engaged with that money? I just want to know, because it was kind of a significant amount of money and resources that were offered to us, whether we still have all that and we're still working with it.
I don't remember a significant amount of money coming from the Pagulas.
I'm talking about like resources, like, there were promises, there were all these great presentations of all these things that would help enhance athletics, right? And digging into like little things like AdPro, where they had $25 per student who was in some type of championship or, league winning team. Do we still have even that like in place? Just little things that I remember picking up. And I'm not saying that that's gonna dictate whether I vote on this budget. I just, at some point, please just, update me on anything. I could be wrong. I just remember having presentations a couple times where we had some things that were pretty enticing, and we agreed upon things, and I just want to know if all of that is still in place, and if there's money tied to it. And again, being this position on the Fiscal Stability Committee, I want to make sure we uncover it.
Dr. Cash, I think she's referring to the field house, the Ralph Wilson Field House, and also the Parks Department with the upgrade to the parks in the city of Buffalo that we're going to utilize for Buffalo Public School sports.
So what we can do with this is we can move this to a committee meeting, because right now the purpose of this board meeting is the budget. And we're supposed to stay focused on the budget at this meeting. So Larry, your hand is up.
Ms. Partner, this is Cecily. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Wait a minute, Cecily. Cecily,
Yes?
I'll take care of it, okay?
Yes, sir.
We're gonna do it at a committee meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Larry.
So before we proceed to a vote, I just want clarification on how we're going to proceed with my recommendation on reading teachers.
Okay.
Well, what is your recommendation?
To consider
To allow schools to switch out for a literacy coach?
Yes.
Have you talked to enough principals that that's what they want to do? That that's even something that they think about?
I have not had those direct conversations. No.
Well, I think we need to get in. Let me work with staff and the principals, see if that's a direction that is feasible for them in this environment, and then we'll come back to you. But right now, we're only dealing with a 6.5 cut. What you could ask, Larry, I think would be quite appropriate, is that, Doc, if monies come in, or if we see some adjustments to this, could we consider restoring those 5 or those 6 reading teachers, something like that, if an opportunity comes up? I'll certainly look to do that if that's a request. But that other one is a different kind of question for this budget, you know?
Okay. Then I'll proceed with the latter question or request.
Okay. All right, duly noted.
Okay, so it's agreed that we're going to talk about at which committee is it? Educational support, or do you want it under finance and ops? Educational support?
Educational support for what Ms. McCosey was talking about.
Okay, all right, we'll move forward with that. And then the grant piece we'll put under Paulette Wood, so that we can have a little more clarity on that piece as well under her finance and ops. There's one more committee. Yes.
Sharon, I have a question. Did anybody say anything about that Google grant that Larry Quinn had got us to expand 40 additional seats over at Bennett, and they don't have room for it? I mean, we went over plant and operations. That's a big part of our budget too. Did anybody say anything about, okay, you're closing these 2 schools, you got the space at Emerson. What about using that Google grant and increasing the spaces over at the program? Did anybody say anything about that? Where does that discussion go?
Can I chime in on that? So my concern is that with this battle, with what we're doing with charter schools, that for some reason or another, on unnoticed or unaddressed, that we need to move children around to provide additional space. One of the requests that I had initiated was to see if our children at bioinformation research, whatever, over to the Emerson Annex, which would open up additional space so that we could grow the computer and applied technology program at Bennett. However, when I asked recently what was happening with school number 28, no one wanted to tell me what was going on. I don't understand how we can fight this fight if we don't expand our innovative high schools program. And each one of them appear to be handicapped. Well, maybe not East now because of maybe this change that's going on, but certainly at International Prep, certainly at Bennett, at MST, the adults are occupying the space where the children need to be. And they're very comfortable, I want to admit. The children are on top of each other, but the adults are really spaced out pretty good with all sorts of amenities up there. And so what I don't understand is that why the conversation has not grown to the point where staff realizes that we need these adults out of these buildings and we need to move and Angela Collins was excited about the possibility of being able to move into that. So, you know, I'm very concerned that when we put together our priorities, that our budget priorities don't reflect the fact that we need to expand our student base in a big way. And that for whatever reason, it's not being allowed to happen. I have feels that he can handle upwards of 800 children if given the opportunity. Everly, who has done significantly great work in that building. It's an environment that I have not seen since my children were there. And so why aren't we expanding space, and why are we allowing the white collar employees to take room from our students, and we're losing seats to charters because we can't expand? Dr. Cash, hold on answering that because another board member raised their hand. Lou Petrucci, did you raise yours? No. That wasn't a raise. Okay, who else hand is up? We have two other hands. Please take your hands down. It needs to be a budget priority that we are expanding seats in this district in a big way. And that's my, I'm disappointed, really disappointed that your ASL did not move that to the next level, because it does not make sense that at this point, a grant has come through the district and additional seats cannot be provided for Bennett, that he has to hold to a 92 seat versus expanding an additional 50 seats. It doesn't make sense to me that we have the students who are interested in coming to Buffalo Public Schools, but we don't have the space to put, especially since that school over there at Floss Street is sitting there. That would be a great building to put the white collar workers in and move them out of the school building. It's just not right. We're just not doing that correctly, I feel.
There's a long response to that, but why don't we just have that for a committee? That's not a way in this budget, and we'll continue a discussion on that. We're committed to innovative new high schools, and we're committed to trying to free Bennett. We want Bennett to be its own standing school. We tried to get ECC to take on MEC, and that hit a few roadblocks. And then we have Angela. She should be near that corridor. We've been trying to get her into that corridor. I don't just want to move her to any building. She needs to be near that corridor.
She was very pleased with that site.
Well,
she could work it. It's a straight road, straight down. She would be right in the medical corridor within a 2-mile radius. She's there.
I understand. But we have some other designs on it, but we should talk about it. Let's talk about it in our next committee.
Talk about it, because at the end of the day, Dr. Cash, over at some of these schools, our children are on top of each other and the adults, are not. And that shouldn't be the case.
A little bit overstated, but let's have the conversation. Now, we were near to a first and a second and all of that. Where are we with that?
We never had the motion, and it never moved.
Somebody moved. Kathy Brown's getting ready to move. I can tell by looking at her.
I move that we vote.
You move that we accept the
accept the 954,000 or million. I'm sorry.
954.7 million dollar budget. Right. Preliminary budget. Okay. So second. Any seconds?
I'll second.
Okay. Any more discussion? We'll go on record to say one thing. This is the last budget that I will vote for that does not have the equity inlays put in it before the budget close, before the budget is voted. We have a new policy moving forward. We will have that in place. Next year, I expect that these equity overlays will be put in place accordingly.
Ooh, that's a tough environment to make that out.
Hey, it was going to work. Trust me.
Don't get worse.
Takes effort. We'll get there. We'll get there.
All right.
We can do it.
Okay. We're about to vote.
Nate.
Are you ready? You want a roll call vote, Madam President?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay. Just note with an either exception or no exception. How do you vote, Dr. Kathy Evans Brown?
No exception.
Mr. Hurd,
No exception.
Ms. J,
No exception.
Ms. McCosey,
No exception.
Mr. Petrucci,
No exceptions.
Dr. Rivera,
No exception.
Mr. Scott,
No exception.
Ms. Woods,
No exceptions.
President Belton Cotman.
No exception.
All right, the budget passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, colleagues.
It's all clear. We can, we will,
Thank you, Jeff.
end this meeting at this point. It is 7:09 on 5/27. The Board of Education special meeting has been an end. Thank you for your participations and stay safe.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, colleagues.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Jeff.
We review this back in.
Thanks, Dr. Cash.